We're going to call the meeting to order, and as I specifically mentioned a few seconds ago, this is a work session. To open this, if we could, with the horrific passing of 500 individuals in Seminole County, including a friend of many, the owner of Del Air Air Conditioning, Bob Della Russo. Let's stand for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. All right. As we move forward, we're going to go straight into our attorney for an announcement. It's my pleasure to introduce Bryant Applegate. Bryant, where are you?
Right here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. As reported in the paper a few days ago, the federal court, Judge Ann Conway, ruled in the county's favor in the River Cross Land Company versus Seminole County case. I talked to the chairman, and in order to get a complete understanding for the public, I'm going to read just a few pages of the introduction that summarizes the court's opinion. But before I do that, first I want to thank Lynn Porter Carlton, who worked with our outstanding counsel, and I believe Todd Norman is in the audience if you have any questions from our outside counsel, who they all did a tremendous job. Todd Norman, Joe Thacker, and Shana Stahl. And of course, Paul Chipbach, who's sitting there, did a tremendous job working with a great staff of Nicole's that did a tremendous job in preparing for the 2018 hearing. So it was truly a team effort. You took a lot of criticism over the last couple years. We even had two constitutional officers interject themselves in writing, quote, legal theories on why we were going to lose. So I want to credit you all. You may remember at the hearing when they threatened a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act and relied on a case. I was pretty adamant that, one, the case was as far off point as possible, and number two, reminded the board, the three of you that were there at the time, that you were to base your decision on the evidence and the record, which you did, and the court found that to be the case. So with all that being said, if you bear with me, I can't tell you how much I wish I could be there right now, but let me go ahead and I'll read the introduction. It'll just take a few minutes, and it starts, the timing, the litigants, and the type and location of development proposed in this case are very rarely present in a Fair Housing Act claim. River Cross, as a non-minority commercial developer, is not the traditional tenant or nonprofit plaintiff committed to integrating the housing available in historically segregated communities. The vast majority of the development proposed by River Cross in this case is commercial, and if approved, would comprise some of the only large commercial and multifamily development built in the rural section of Seminole County, which is inhabited by a tiny sliver of the county's 500,000 residents. The River Cross proposal to develop affordable housing in such a rural area is also highly unusual. The proposed site currently has no infrastructure, no roads, no bridge, no public transportation, no portable water or sewer utilities, and no expansion of such infrastructure is planned by the county. The land is surrounded by a significant river basin area, a wilderness preserve, rural agricultural lands, and more than 40% of the proposed site consists of wetlands. Affordable housing tax credits are awarded to developers for units in areas with public transportation and employment opportunities for the low-income tenants. Rivercross decided to add the, quote, affordable housing, end quote, provision to its application at the last minute, just 2 days before a commission meeting and after it became clear that the county staff and the zoning commission would recommend denial of the Rivercross application. During the county commission meeting, although Rivercross represented that it intended to develop what it characterized as one of the, quote, best premier communities, end quote, in Seminole County, Rivercross disingenuously used the threat of a lawsuit under the Federal Fair Housing Act as the fulcrum to urge county commissioners to approve the entire Rivercross proposal for the 1.5 million square feet of commercial space and the 1,370 densely grouped residential units. Since 1991, in order to avoid, quote, urban sprawl, end quote, Seminole County's urban-rural boundary line has restricted development of commercial projects like the Rivercross proposal to the western two-thirds of the county, where there is sufficient infrastructure and vacant land. On developed land in the county to the east of the Econ-Lahatchie River Basin lacks the adequate infrastructure to support commercial and dense residential developments, and is comprised primarily of parks, conservation area, agricultural land, and timberland. Single-family residents of 5 and 10 acre lots, completely dependent on well, water, and septic tanks, constitute the other fifth of the rural area. At the time the county considered the Rivercross proposal in 2018, a significant amount of land in the urban area was vacant and still available for development of commercial and multifamily projects, with the co-commitment infrastructure already in place. Seminole County has more than 5,000 affordable housing units located in the urban area close to transportation and employment. During the Board of County Commissioners meeting, county staff and urban planning consultants explained that without Rivercross providing adequate and accurate plans for expanding infrastructure requirements for a higher density water and wastewater services, transportation, and the protection of natural resources abundant in the rural area, they recommended that the Rivercross application be denied as incomplete. At the end of the 4-hour meeting, the chair of the county commission summed things up. The boundary line has, quote, nothing to do with the rural area. It has everything to do with the urban area because the policy is to develop those particular areas of the urban area before developers would go to the cheaper land in the rural area. And the boundary and the rural boundary has more to do with all of the county, not with just the eastern areas, end quote. The Board of County Commissioners followed the staff recommendation and denied the Rivercross proposal. Shortly thereafter, Rivercross sued the county under the Fair Housing Act. Rivercross asserts a single claim against Seminole County under the Fair Housing Act, alleging that the boundary line perpetrates a segregative effect. Unsurprisingly, Rivercross lacks standing to sue because it has not shown that the 75 units of affordable or income-based housing would serve minority residents. Rivercross has also failed to produce any evidence that the county's denial of the proposal significantly perpetrates or reinforces segregation, which is also fatal to its claim. Moreover, even if Rivercross has significant evidence that the boundary line caused a segregative effect, the county has shown it had legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons for denial of the Rivercross proposal based on its desire to avoid, quote, urban sprawl, end quote, under the governing Florida community planning statutes, and Rivercross has failed to propose a less discriminatory alternative. For the reasons set forth in detail below, Seminole County's motion to exclude the expert opinions of Dr. Charles Cowan and for summary judgment will be granted, and Rivercross motion for partial summary judgment will be denied. The court went on for close to 90 more pages in detail, explaining the law, the criteria that the plaintiff had to meet, and on each one of those elements ruled that the plaintiff failed to meet his burden. Again, I want to thank Lynn and Paul, Todd, Shana, and Joe, and the great staff. The court went to great lengths to quote Rebecca, Melody, Frederick, and others in the decision. It's a tremendous decision, and it was a long battle. The court, excuse me, the court also awarded the right to the county to seek cost. And we estimate right now, we won't know for certain until we get everything together, but somewhere around $50,000, give or take, and we're going to pursue that very aggressively. I believe Todd is in the audience, and I would turn it over to Todd for a moment if you have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Todd, it's a pleasure to bring you up here. Yeah, it's a pleasure to bring you up here, but as you're walking up, I want you to know how much we appreciate your staff, your hard work and effort on this behalf. This commission, as it's constituted today, has been steadfast on fighting against this project and other related deals that could have come up. I would be very remiss in representing this commission if I didn't also say that I've read a lot of court orders and summary judgments in the past, and two things stood out very clear to me. Number one, I have to give this staff, Rebecca and her team, Nicole and her team, all the way down the line, kudos beyond belief, because the judge actually quoted them in many cases as to why she, my favorite judge, now, why she was turning down. And number two, just the way you worked, so you and Bryant and the whole staff of our attorneys worked so seamlessly together in this pursuit. I have never seen a summary judgment that was so strong in my life. And please, I'll after Todd says something, if anybody wants to say anything, please feel free to do so. I'll call on you.
Well, thank you so much. As I said, my name's Todd Norman. I appreciate being here. I appreciate the trust that this board has placed in us. I know the people of Seminole County placed a lot of trust in you to do the right thing, and I know that this was a politically difficult thing to do. And I know that you had to stay steadfast through 2 years of a lot of negative publicity about some of these issues, and you guys, you and your staff stayed very strong on this issue, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the trust you place in my firm and me to try to get the right result, and I'm very glad that we could obtain this result for the people of Seminole County. I think it's very important to the people in this county, and I think you've done something that's very important to them, and I think the judge has too. So, other than that, I simply came to answer any questions you might have. As you know, there's still a state proceeding going on, so I can't speak too much of. We try not to speak out of school related to these things, so I don't plan to. But if you have any questions, I stand to answer them.
Thank you. Commissioner Hur.
A question about cost versus attorney's fees.
So, as you know, there's, from that question, I can tell you know, there's, the court awarded us costs. We will recover those. There's certain things that are taxable and not taxable under the federal rules, and so it'll limit what we can recover in that regard. The federal rules also allow you to make a motion for attorney's fees, and there are certain criteria under which you can get one. This statute has the phrase that the prevailing party recovers fees, which you might sound very good to you, but I will note to you that there are limiting cases related to that when you are the defendant, that is the one who is accused to have done something inappropriate under the statute as opposed to the plaintiff, and it's much more restrictive than if you were the plaintiff. So while we will review that and give the county advice as to how to proceed related to that, you should know that there are limitations.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Todd, thank you very much. I don't want to speak out of turn, but and this is not really a question to you, but Brian, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
You mentioned something, since the question was to Todd, but I'd like you to answer. You mentioned something to me about the attorney's fees, and that was a question, Commissioner Herwood. Do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I obviously agree with Todd, and I think I'll borrow the term he used. We're going to take a deep dive into the applicable case law to determine whether or not we can get fees.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Todd, really.
Thank you.
I know you still have work to do, but thank you for what you did. And I know the citizens of Seminole County thank you also very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, since we still have pending litigation, I'm not going to get into it, but I would like to just echo some of your sentiments about the county staff as a whole. This just wasn't the legal side, it was also the planning side that actually helped. And I want to thank Nicole for her staff, and I didn't know if Nicole would like to address that, because there are so many people on your side that set the foundation for this.
Thank you. I would like to join you in acknowledging the good work of Rebecca and her team, as well as the folks in community services. Melody Fredericks, in particular, played a very strong role. And I don't want to forget Tina Williamson, who is not here, but she was leading the team when all of this started. And I just want to congratulate them and thank them for all their hard work. This was a difficult project, as we all know, and anybody who's read the opinion could see how highly the judge relied on staff's work with respect to drawing her conclusions with respect to the lawsuit, and they gave this board a great foundation for what was, I know, a very difficult decision for them, and I'm grateful but not surprised. And I just want to thank them all and acknowledge them publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Zimbabwe.
Thank you. Without going in and echoing every sentiment that's already been said, yes, the staff was paramount in this decision, but this judge obviously was able to put the political nuances aside and get right to the meat of the matter, and I think that the opinion clearly indicates that, which I think that's a great day for justice in any case, an occasion when it involves a political body and this type of thing. I also want to thank everyone that was involved, thank the citizens of Seminole County. This was very near and dear to my heart as one of those individuals on the ground floor of getting the referendum on the ballot for the citizens to decide to set the rural boundary aside. So this is certainly a great day for Seminole County, and I want to thank all the attorneys, staff, my fellow commissioners who supported that very much. So thank you all.
Let's move along. We are here in a work session, and as we all know and have heard before, thank you, Todd. See you later, buddy. This meeting can be viewed in person at the Chambers or on SGTV, on YouTube, and by registering to participate in the Zoom webinar. Residents can provide public comment in person or by registering to speak on Seminole County website and the Board of County Commissioners webpage. If you are unable to join us via computer or online, interested parties should call 407-665-0808 for additional information on how to participate via telephone. Please adhere to the CDC COVID-19 guidelines and silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Christine, I am going to call up you, our Chief Administrator of Human Resources and Charity, and Charles Cook, our Benefits Consultant with McGriff Consulting, will present the 2021 Annual Employee Wellness Program updates and recommendations.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Christina Brandolini, Chief Administrator of Human Resources. I'm joined this morning by Charles Cook and Andrew Fox with McGriff Consulting, and we're here to present our annual wellness update. So I'm going to introduce Charles Cook, who is going to begin the presentation.
Mr. Cook?
I can do it.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioners, we're very glad to be here. I want to share with you a little bit of history from our perspective coming in, and then make some recommendations for the future. If we go, I have the clicker, okay. Here we go. And I know you have this packet, so I'm not going to read the agenda to you of what we're going to go through. I gave it to you a couple of ways, a 3-year look back in terms of your cost globally. So we have 18, 19, and 20 with the total spend for medical and RX. We can skip total enrollment. That's an insuranceism where we count all 12 months of the enrollment. And your average enrollment has been pretty steady in the mid-1400s. You can see here that you have been relatively steady. So one of the holy grails of what we do is determining impact of wellness on costs. I will say that my clients who have programs like yours have consistently had below trend in terms of their cost for medical. What the exact ROI calculation is, that I hope one day we will have perfectly. But you can see there was a dip in 19, back up in 20. One of the things implemented was called PCM, and I'm going to call my colleague Andrew Fox to explain kind of where we are with that and what that impact looks like.
Hi. So the PCM process got live in February. It's a little bit of a delay due to PCM receiving the exact pricing on the medications from Florida Blue. So that is live right now, and we expect the first report to be available in August. So as of now, there's been 107 cases that have been identified, and then so far 22 have been denied from the physician, 1 has been denied by the member, and then 16 have been approved.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, PCM is Prescription Care Management.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that not just the citizens, but the staff understands what PCM is.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And then in August, we expect to have a report as far as potential cost savings, not only for the program, but also alternatives as well, too. So as we begin to look for the January 1st, 2020 renewal, there'll be options as far as rebates are concerned, the plan performance, and also formulary changes we could look at as well to potentially find additional cost savings.
If we have a question that's relevant to what they're talking about, do you want us to ask it, or do you want us to wait until the very end?
What is your preference? Do you mind have
go ahead.
questions?
Okay.
Please, go ahead.
So of the 107 cases that were identified, were the employees brought into that loop from the beginning, or did they find out after the fact that their physician had been contacted?
So the 107 are currently in process right now. So it all begins with the physician first. So,
No.
excuse me?
So no.
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was that was what
correct.
I was looking for. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no.
Continue, please.
Okay. So we expect to have an update in August, so we'll be able to give projections as far as the cost savings are concerned, because we'll have 6 full months worth of data, and then we'll be able to deliver a meaningful cost projection as it comes to the pharmacy program. That's it, Charles.
Thank you, Commissioner Delary. I have worked my entire career to avoid acronyms in the insurance industry, and I failed here today.
It's okay.
But it won't happen for a while, and I will remember. In the pharmacy space, there is the prescription care management, there's the formulary, there's rebates, there's a bunch of moving parts. And one of the parts that we're also exploring is kind of a developing trend that our company has been looking at. And I look at it like a scholarship program, if you will. There are a lot of funding options for people on very expensive medications, but they don't know how to access them. So it would almost be like if you're going to college and there may be scholarships out there that you don't know are available, trying to access those. So we're looking at this very holistically on the prescription part. The next slide is just graphically showing the last 3 years, 2021 year to date, the most recent 12 months, the projected for 2021, and then the projected for next year, okay? So this again is a slower curve than what we see throughout the industry. And secondly, yesterday I was able to get claims through May, and so the projection for 2021 dipped down a little bit, and the projection for next year dipped down a little bit too. So the trend is good. It's very early, but it is good to have a good trend now. In terms of the renewal, every month we give this projection to Human Resources, so we know what the big part is, which is the claims. The fixed cost in terms of the admin that's not changing. And then we have the stop loss. So the second bullet here said that the claim projection is between 9 and 12 for next year. That's very conservative based on April with trend. With May, I'm sorry, I now have claims through April. They're a month late. I got April. That's based on March. Based on April, that number ticked down about 3% in terms of what we're looking at for a claim projection. The wild card in any renewal for self-funded is the stop-loss coverage. And that is where the industry is seeking what's called a leverage trend increase that could be from 18 to 22%. We will be shopping that completely with the entire market for stop-loss alternatives to be sure we have the absolute best price. In reality, what I hope I've seen recently is single-digit on the stop-loss, which would drive a single-digit globally, at least, on your entire program. So again, every month, we are updating everything but the stop-loss so that that projection can be known as soon as possible, and we have a meeting in a couple of weeks to begin to talk about contributions and how the cost share is between employees and the county. Oh, this is really good to have this is just your 4 plans. And so you can't see it, but you've seen it in your packet. We have 4 plans. They reflect kind of a legacy from a very rich offering up to what would be considered today a rich HSA plan. In terms of the enrollment, we continue to have people move out of the most expensive, lowest deductible plan, and we have increases in the mid plan, the low plan, not quite at the same rate. And then surprisingly here to me, the HSA plan enrollment has remained relatively flat and has not gone up as we might expect. We have it separated out by the constitutional offices, and then at the bottom is the forms submitted, the regional alternative standard forms submitted for the wellness program. Okay, so then we get into the wellness program. So it was put on pause for last year because of COVID. And the question, recommendation, discussion today for your consideration is to restart it and continue and do the 5th year of that program. And that would mean we start communication now, because people had a year where they didn't have to meet the standard or get the form. During that year, if they had not met it before, they could go ahead and meet the criteria to have the lower rate if they wanted to. So our thoughts are to re-implement that and not go another year with people not doing that, and continue to finish the 5 years, develop the strategy for after the 5 years. And we're working at a number of places to do that, to both expand what you're doing in terms of the requirements and to expand the level of activity, physical activity that could be rewarded going forward. And so that's involved meetings with Human Resources, with the Wellness Coordinator, to really try to evaluate the impact of these items. In terms of the program itself, again, you have this, but the standards in blue, if you meet those standards, then you get the discount. You also, if you don't meet the standards, you can get the reasonable alternative standard through your physician to fill out a form, and then the discounts are there, and there's an additional cost if you're a smoker. So, Christina, I hope that I covered the wellness very broad brush. There's a lot that we've done that we're excited about, talking about for the future, but for this, we're talking about re-implementing and doing the 5th year.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I'm going to, questions, and I think that Commissioner Herr.
I didn't touch.
Oh, I thought you,
I did.
okay,
I just moved. I'd be happy
I'm
to talk.
very- hey,
You
listen,
know how
I'm-
much I love talking about
I'm like a
this, so.
deer anymore, you know, if I see one of you flick, or, you know, then I'm calling on you, Commissioner Lockhart.
In prior organizations, there was a plan that actually looked at not just total cholesterol, but the ratio of the good to bad. Is that an option here, or do we not have the ability to look at that data?
I don't know that we have the ability to look at that data now. Christina?
No, I'm sorry.
I don't know if we have that now. I can see if we have it now, and I think that's something that could be considered for the future because the ratio is critical to
Right.
the situation.
We had a lot of employees in a prior organization that had a higher number, but when they went to their physician, they said, oh, but your ratios are great. This is not something I'm worried about at all. So it was sort of misleading, and it caused some issues. And so if that's an option that we might want to consider, maybe?
I think that's thank you for that suggestion. There are other things that we've talked with wellness about because people are different, and the absolute number may not be right for everybody, and that's a perfect example.
Okay.
Mr. Cook, could you put back that line that was talking about, that was the last page before the end, I think it was?
I've lost control.
It was the one on the wellness program, what you had to meet. I think it was what Commissioner Lockhart was talking about.
Page 9.
Page 9.
There.
All right. And just to make sure that we have all, what Commissioner Lockhart was talking about, we, a number of years ago, through the influence of Commissioner Herr, we gradually lowering or increasing the wellness program, so it would be, so people, you know, could test their progress when it comes to this. So I guess the same question I was having, these numbers are not unreasonable for most people to meet. Is that correct?
No, they're not unreasonable.
All right. Is there other questions? Commissioner Herr? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Delory, then Commissioner Herr.
No, go for,
You were first, Commissioner.
The other question, a couple of questions I have is that I do agree that medical wellness is extremely important to gaining control of your healthcare costs. That's clearly documented. And I agree that at the last year, we put it on hold because of the pandemic. For us to bring it back, I think it's important, but how we bring it back is just as important. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we're in June. We need to have everything done by October. We have to have your exams and your doctors. Definitely, the last time you could possibly do that would probably be sometime in September. So you basically have July and August to get back on the program since we put it on hold for over a year. And I'd like to basically bring it back, but more importantly, maybe do it mid-year so that people can get back into the rhythm of, even though people are supposed to be well or healthy throughout the pandemic, we all know that, including myself, I'll pick on me because it's a lot easier, that we put on a couple extra pounds through the pandemic. Maybe you didn't walk as much. To initiating the program and bringing it back hard, back October 1st. It can be difficult, and I'd like to see if there's a way to do it mid-year of next year, during the mid-year adjustment, to allow county staff to ease back into it instead of just doing a hard recoup of getting back into the program. Is that possible to do?
Christina, I see you want to answer this question.
Sorry.
I just wanted to answer from the county perspective. Obviously, we'll, take the board direction, from a facilitating process. That is something that we would be able to do. There are some logistics. We typically roll out the employee contribution during open enrollment. And so, if we didn't do that, folks would have a rate at open enrollment, and then we would be announcing sometime, mid-year a new rate. So, but, certainly, like I said, we can, if that is the board direction, we can do that.
And the reason I'm bringing it up is because if it is possible, then there needs to be some dialogue amongst us. How quickly we want to get into this, I think it's important, but to stagger it, to allow people to get back into the... Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. I think it's important for us to stagger getting back into it and starting the program back up, because it's been on hold for over the past year. And I think it's important to allow the county staff to have that time to get back into wellness, obviously. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd?
I'm going to start there and then go backwards through my comments. I could be wrong, but I think if you change payroll deductions mid-year, it requires a different enrollment.
Well, technically, and I'm not a compliance person, but we have announced this is your deduction, the higher one, and it can be lowered when the wellness is met during the year. You can't, from a Section 125 standpoint, you can't raise it during the year. Now, I would want that to go through our compliance department and your administrative function, but that's how you could theoretically do that if you wanted, or you could offer a reward mid-year.
Well, you're talking about raising it to the 45. I'm talking about pulling us back into the wellness program where I've carried forward my previous status.
Yes.
And now my status changes because I didn't comply. Mid-year, we're changing a payroll deduction.
I was thinking that you would go to the high deduction, the non-discounted January 1.
My guess is here we would not.
Okay.
Just my guess. So
Then-
we need to think about whether it creates a
Understand.
brand-new annual enrollment, so you got to come back with that.
Right.
Because we're not going to answer this
Because-
question. Neither of us are compliance people, but
Right.
my guess is our compliance people are shuddering somewhere behind the scenes.
Yes, mine knows that I'm here, and she's shuddering just that I'm here without her.
That you're on my, yeah. And so the second question is, with regard to easing back into the program, is that you have a look back, right? We have a look back within the Florida Blue Wellness platform so that whatever you're getting done gets done, the measurement counts for a long period of time. And you have a reasonable alternative standard which says we're just going to engage with a primary care physician. It's a fairly low bar. So the concept of easing back in is not a bad one if it doesn't create a second annual enrollment, because the amount of work with that is significant on all fronts. And we'll pull you off track of the strategic direction for future, my 2 cents. I also want to remind us that the wellness program is not just about cost and not just about lowering costs, but improving lifespan and lifestyle of the employees and families that we insure. And I don't ever want to lose track of that discussion because this is such a big line item. That's what we focus on. So let's not, I just want to keep that front of mind. My perception of total cholesterol versus the ratio is that Florida Blue did not track that, so that's a worthy check. My perception on PCM checking with the physician first, you have 2 routes that you can go with those programs. My preference is physician first, so that the patient is not bothered should the physician be against the change. And so this is healthcare, physician first is always the best thing to do. And then it's a physician engagement with the patient and potentially a pharmacist engagement with the patient that is probably better than going to the patient and rattling the patient's cage before it's medically appropriate. So that was not a bad answer that you gave on that program. My question with regard to all of this is a bigger question. I don't know that the Florida Blue Wellness Program has continued to progress. So I saw in the literature that we were considering outsourcing wellness, and so that's in your evaluation. I, for one, would support us outsourcing the wellness administration based on the limitations of the program that I know about. But if Florida Blue hasn't upgraded their system to accommodate the wellness program, they need to either reduce our fees or we need to be in market. And I was very clear about that with them for the previous 2 years now, maybe 3, just so that I share that with you. It is not, what we had was not at market standard, and they're very well aware of that.
Commissioner LaLaurie, did you?
Well, I was going to just continue the conversation because I think it's important for us to have it where, yes, it's important for us to restart the wellness program, but to restart it and give everyone a deadline of the enrollment of October 1 to get everything done, it's a fast restart. And if there's a way to do a soft restart, I think that it behooves us to look at that because part of this is also education. I mean, this is summer months. People are going to be more, people are concerned about their health, don't get me wrong. But in the summer months, as we all know, with going back to school, there's going to be a lot of distractions. And I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we're being fair to all our employees. And I really think a soft start is just as important to make sure that all the employees that we represent are looking at this holistically instead of just saying, hey, I can't meet it, maybe next year. Because that does happen.
Anyone else? Commissioner Zimbauer?
Yes, thank you. I would agree on getting back on track with the wellness program. I would like, however, if we can get a briefing before we decide cholesterol counts. You know, there's a body of science out there that talks about LDL-C, LDL-P, and typical lipid testing is LDL-C, which gives an overall, not necessarily the actual particle count, which apparently there's a body of science that now speaks to the particle count, and size is actually more important to heart disease than a standard lipid test. So if that's something we could consider, I would very much appreciate that. And secondary to that, the PCM, I acutely understand how that works. I would like to know, however, why were we so delayed on getting things going with PCM?
I'm calling on people now.
Christina?
I probably am on the muscle to answer that question, to be honest with you. Do you want me to answer the question? I can be very honest.
Okay.
Well, maybe we don't want honesty.
We want honesty. We all want honesty. There was a significant delay from Florida Blue in providing the data. And then when the data was provided, it was scraped to the degree that PCM could not work with it. And then when we got that resolved, they started working with it. So this was more phone calls than I care to recount in Highland's engagement in order to get this done. And it is not unusual that pharmacy benefit management firms, PBMs, would resist sending data like that because now there's a second set of eyes in their deal.
Sure.
But this went well beyond what I saw with other customers, such as United Healthcare, Cigna, so it just took longer. They're very well aware of the fact that it took a lot longer than it did elsewhere, and that it possibly should have.
But do we understand why? I understand all that, but was there a reason why it took so long?
It is-
Compared to other clients or so forth?
I do understand why. I don't think I want to put that on the public record, but I do understand why. There's just resistance, and it's a technology play, and it's different with this vendor. It is different. And you could probably weigh in.
Yeah, Christina, do you want to add anything before we go on to the next question?
I would just say, in terms of the functionality of reporting that we are or are not able to get from Florida Blue from a client perspective, that probably is similar to other vendors who are working with them. I don't know another better way to say that on the record, but I think, their reporting limitations that we see probably is felt with other vendors as well.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yes.
ask-
Wait a minute, Commissioner Zimbauer still has the floor. Then I'll call on Commissioner Delory.
So the data belongs to us, correct?
That's where I was going.
The
It's our
data
data.
belongs to us.
That's where I was
Right.
going.
So I understand, and a second set of eyes, and I understand that as well. And I mean, I think those of us who were during the course of making a decision to go with PCM understood the benefit of going with PCM
Yes.
was to have a second set of eyes and the possibility that there would be savings to this county for the cost of prescription drugs. And after we did that, and I inquired to find out where we stood, I kept getting answers, well, we haven't got the data. We haven't got the data. We haven't got the data. Well, 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, our data we can't get. That's where my heartburn is at, why we couldn't get our own data, number one. Number two, I think what I've just heard, once we got the data, it's been scrubbed to the point where maybe it could not be used.
Back then.
Back, understood.
It's been resolved.
Right. And my question would be is, why would that ever happen? I mean, was that purposeful and tortuous or not? So I guess what I'm saying at the end of the day, if we went into this engaged with the thought process, we were going to save money, we were going to save revenue for this county, in using a vendor such as this or using this technology, then I would like to know what the cost was involved in the delay of getting our data based on a cost analysis of what we do know once we did get the data, of what that would have been during the time we didn't get our own data, and we had data that was scrubbed to the point we couldn't use it. I don't know if that's something staff could
I love that.
work with a
I
consultant
love that, and I want to find that out.
understand, because here's what I'm afraid of, and I'm going to be deadly honest. I've seen it in the private sector. When we have a new technology that comes on board that is going to penetrate and look at a true savings and pull the cloth off of what's really happening in the prescription world and the cost of prescriptions, a lot of times people don't like to give that information up because there are side deals going on between the insurers and the pharmaceuticals and so forth. And I hope that's not the case here. But that said, I would still like to understand what that cost nexus of loss to this county was during that time of delay. We may not be able to get an exact, but there should be some kind of ratio that we should be able to understand where that's at.
I would think we could, once we know what we're saving X per month or members, we can retroactively look to when we should have had that data. I think that's a great idea, and that's a negotiation tool. So when we took over in our initial meetings, there was, even though that it started, this is our discount private information, was the first meeting that we got as we were trying to get our arms around it. And the pharmacy industry, as Commissioner Herr and I live in this world, for 10 years, we've been trying to win a game of whack-a-mole. And literally, the parts move and move and move, and it's a secret, and you uncover one part, and then there's a new secret. But we feel very good about where we are in pushing that envelope.
Good, great, thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Did you get your?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right.
That's okay.
It just was a while.
It's all
Go ahead.
right.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christina, not today, but can you brief us all on the issue of that data? Because I think the data is extremely important. It's the county's data, even though we have to always follow HIPAA requirements. I get that. But I want to make sure that we, as a board, understand what's been happening, because the county owns the data because it's our staff.
Correct.
And I think that Commissioner Zimbauer has a great point, and I think it's important for us to understand what our contract is, not just with the consultant that we just hired or hired a couple months back, but also with Florida Blue, to understand the ramifications on what we should and shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely.
If you can brief us all on that, that'd be great.
Sure.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Two things. I've been involved in other organizations and going through selecting a new health insurance provider. and there are vast differences among the major players in terms of what they are wired to deliver. And so as an organization, I feel like this particular Florida Blue was selected for maybe what this organization wanted at that time. And we are getting more and more into a place where I feel like we're asking for things maybe that they just aren't wired as much to do. I think Commissioner Herr was kind of alluding to that earlier. And, you know, there are others in the industry who are already knocking this wellness thing out of the park, and this is their wheelhouse. And so maybe it's time for us to think about, instead of continuing to bang our head against a wall and try to get somebody to be something that we want them to be, we just go find somebody who's already who we want. That might be a worthy discussion at some point. The other thing that I noticed back to and I know we have an updated presentation, but I looked at the one that was in the book. Under the wellness program components, there was clinical medical support under consideration, and I noticed that that was removed in the updated version. So I was going to ask, why is that there and what does that mean? But now it's gone, so now I'm really curious.
So the reason that I removed the first portion is some of that was what we had done previously before COVID, like the on-site wellness and some things that are no longer recommended or are not recommended at this time. So it was kind of the larger portion of that. But the clinical is something that is offered now through, you know, McGriff has some staff that can make some recommendations, you know, based on reasonable alternative standard. And then Florida Blue also has staff that don't work with us directly, but, you know, like almost like a case manager. Is that a good, am I giving that
Disease
a good?
management,
Okay,
case
disease management, case management, who can help those with chronic illnesses. So that's still happening. Like I said, I just removed the whole spreadsheet.
Right. There are a lot of things that were under the wellness program components that I thought were, you know, worthy, and then they were gone. And so I hope we don't completely abandon them for whatever reason.
Thank you. Commissioner Herr?
That clinical support was a vestige of the old days of clinic evaluation. I'm just going to, this document started 7, 8 years ago when the clinic was in play. And so that clinical support was, are we bringing a nurse practitioner on board? All of that stuff was in play and under consideration, and for all the right reasons, not done. I would tell you, I want to go back to the data conversation, particularly with the comment that Commissioner Lockhart made about potentially sourcing alternative vendors. To Charles Cook, do you have a recommended data analytics platform?
We have a couple of routes that we go. So I don't know, we have a recommended platform. We have our in-house actuarial team that deals with all of that.
So I think the takeaway from this is we need to figure out how to get our data into a platform that can survive past
Absolutely.
Transition of carrier, because once we go, we won't be able to get it from them.
Absolutely, and we
Also
know
different from other carriers, Commissioner Zimbauer. Typically, you can go back and ask for your data after the fact. I can't imagine we could possibly get it.
So amongst the comments and questions, we are exploring an agnostic wellness platform because sadly, in my opinion, no carrier has knocked it out of the park. They think they have, but we would like to have something that would survive any relationship you have and be able to function at a much higher level than any individual carrier who's at the top. From your data, from a not having what would be considered market offerings and expectations, I would think it's very important to look at alternatives. And then you get to Commissioner Laurie, do we have time to do that for 2022?
We don't
Thank you
know.
for shaking your head, okay.
Absolutely not.
So, but that is something that would start as soon as we're done with the open enrollment. That's a big process. to ferret out and understand all of what the new relationship would be like. Thank you for suggesting this, because to have all that data is critical. And, you know, it's challenging sometimes when one carrier doesn't do things that are kind of standard relative to others. And the market president here, named Tony Jenkins, our coffees involve that conversation. You do things that are different sometimes. They're always worse, but they're just different.
Mr. Chairman, when you get a chance. Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Christina, if I may. Christina, has anyone had the conversation with the upper people of Florida Blue as we talked about Tony Jenkins? Has anyone spoke to him at all?
Yes.
Okay, and the response was, or is?
Since
I'm asking Christina.
Okay.
She's the one in charge.
Sorry.
And I was not on those specific conversations. Lastly, McGriff had spoke to them. They indicated some resistance because of proprietary information, what they felt was proprietary information. But, you know, in those conversations, they came to a compromise agreement. So,
The reason why I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, is that in the past, when we've had these conversations and we brought in upper management of Blue, they've been there and they've been helping us, and I wanted to make sure that we're continuing that dialogue. Instead of just saying, well, if they're not giving it to us, we're going to go out to the market. Well, that's fine, but did we really get to the right person, and did that person actually speak to? I'm asking Christina.
I still get to talk.
I
You
mean,
do?
yes,
You do.
through our consultants, did speak with them, like I said, which is how we got to where we are now with PCM. Like I said, there was a compromise that enabled us to move forward with PCM.
Well, I would encourage our staff with our consultants to actually speak to upper management of Blue,
Okay.
to understand what the resistance is, so that we can actually articulate that to us.
My understanding is that it was proprietary information, that Florida Blue felt that it was proprietary information on their side as far as, you know, negotiated rates and things such as that, that they didn't feel belonged to the county, but belonged to Florida Blue, is my understanding.
Okay.
Commissioner Herr and then Commissioner Zimbauer.
It's like pulling into the McDonald's drive-through and asking for a Chick-fil-A sandwich.
Great analogy.
And it's not because they don't want to deliver the Chick-fil-A sandwich, it's because they don't have it. And if you really want the Chick-fil-A sandwich, it's ironic that I chose this analogy for a wellness discussion, so let's just,
I was going to go there.
it's not lost on me that this was a bad example, but it's not that they don't want to comply, it's that the system is not set up to do that. And at some point it may be. And so it's always about aligning where a client is with their programming and where the vendor is with their ability to deliver on the programming. And so it's a philosophical difference. And there is a conservative nature to their interpretation of what is proprietary and what is not, to get back to Commissioner Zimbauer's conversation. And so it varies by player. I will say that the pharmacy program that is offered through Florida Blue, which is through Prime, is a full pass-through contract, which is ahead of the industry. It's been a full pass-through contract for years, and we do have a player in the background that's validating that and validating rebates, et cetera. So in that respect, they were ahead of the curve. In the wellness perspective, it's different. So, and in the data sharing perspective, it's different. So it all depends on what you want. You got to be at the right drive-through window.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Yes. Following up on that analogy, I want to make sure I'm following that.
You go to McDonald's?
I got to believe Florida Blue knows how much cholesterol meds this organization is purchasing for its client, for our insured. It must know how much blood pressure meds we are purchasing for this insured class. So I find it hard to believe somebody as large as Florida Blue does not have a pulse on exactly what drugs are being administered, purchased, paid for, and negotiated, regardless of what system they use, what analysis they use, or platform, or programming. All I'm saying is, we should have a clear understanding why the delay happened, and I think we've heard some of it. For me, I'd like to see the contractual agreement that we have for Florida Blue, so I can review it and share with the rest of the commissioners, so we can all have a clear understanding what's proprietary, what's not, what that interpretation might be. Getting back to the clinical side, to Commissioner Lockhart's point, I think that's a great service and asset we should look at in future plans. I can tell you from personal experience, when my late wife was extremely ill, that was a very valuable service when I was running around and my family was running around trying to handle all other things, to have someone in the background that is vetting the process, helping make the calls, helping do all the things that help you understand what you're dealing with when it comes to the drugs, the care, the other needs that you have. That's a huge benefit from that aspect. So that's all I have.
Anyone else? Commissioner Herb?
The program has that. I don't know
Yes.
if you guys are going
Yeah.
to step up and say, the program does have that.
Good.
So there is medical management behind the scenes, there's case management, all of that is being paid through the Florida Blue administrative fees. So that's not a gap.
What I was referring to was an on-site medical clinic for employees, which was something that
Okay.
Which is not.
I thought we had said we weren't interested in, so I was surprised to see it back on the list. Agree 100%. That's a
Great.
fabulous benefit to our employees and their families. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and like I said, that was the original, from the original 5-year plan, so there were some things that we are still doing, the lunch and learns, some of the other on-site.
The fitness, the coaching.
Correct. So,
Yes, all
but
that
then there
good
were
stuff.
things that we're not doing, like the on-site biometrics, and so it was just easier to take it off than to try to mess with it. Like I say, that was part of the original 5-year plan that was approved in 2014, but just to make it clean, I removed all of it.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to apologize for giving anyone on the team a heart attack for thinking that I was suggesting that we were going to start the adventure of looking for a new third-party administrator like next week. I just know that the rate, the pace that we go for change is not quick. And so I thought if I just brought it up now and fired it over the bow, it would at least be out there in the ether spinning, and that would give us, something to talk about at some point.
Certainly, we'll follow up. We have a couple of things to follow up on the contract and the PCM discussion. And Colester also, I'll set something up with each of you to kind of discuss all of those things and what to do going forward.
Great, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, have we decided what we're doing?
Well,
moving
that's
forward?
what we hadn't finished. Yeah, I want to make sure
Right.
that this is the first time we've stopped at asking questions for a while. So Christina, do you want to complete, or are you complete?
No.
I didn't think so. Please continue.
Well, I mean, I'm complete. I just, we just need the direction as far as, what we'll be announcing for the annual wellness for this current year.
Okay. All right, Commissioner, then that's what she needs, that's what the county manager needs. Does anybody want to start that? We've talked a little bit about it from a number of different directions. Does anybody want to start on it? Commissioner Zimbauer?
I would defer to Commissioner Herr, and I like the idea of, this won't be ready for 2022. I think is what I've heard, if you try to make a turn right now on some of these things. So what do you believe is a realistic time frame?
So I'm going to stop and delineate, because we answered a whole bunch of questions but not the question that you asked. I do think it's realistic, if we're going to take it out to RFP, that happens in time for 1/1 of 2023, absent of the ability to piggyback, and I don't think that exists. So that's a 1/1/2023, which would probably have to happen starting in October, November, right after you close your open
Right.
enrollment. With regard to that, we need to start thinking about a data analytics platform now and getting 2 to 3 years' worth of Florida Blue data loaded into the data analytics platform that then survives the new player. We can have a long discussion about an agnostic wellness program, carrier agnostic wellness program. That'll be healthy. The next piece of that is the wellness for this year. And this is, I think we got to get it back in play. It was very conscious to use the word pause, because this is about taking care of yourself and improving your health outcomes. It was paused. That didn't mean you stopped. That didn't mean you didn't go to your physician. That didn't mean you didn't have measurements. So to say that, we're going to do this in a very compressed time frame, I might be missing the point, Christina, around that. So why don't you refresh our memories on how it would work if you roll it out? There is a look back, correct?
Correct. So, typically it gets rolled out in end of May, beginning of June. Partially that's, we're waiting for a couple months of stop loss to be able to bring it forward. But the look back period it's from October 1st, 2020 through September 30, 2021. So at any point in time that an employee went to their physician during that time frame, October 1, 2020 to September 30, 2021, we can accept that from their doctor, so that wellness visit. I also want to note that the biometric criteria for this year is the same as it was for 2019. So 2019, the biometric criteria, we paused in 2020. This year, the criteria does stay the same as it was in 2019. So we haven't moved the mark and made it more difficult, if you will. So it is a year period that we will accept for the physical and the biometric. They just have to get the forms into us by October so that we can load in their the wellness rates and such. So that's the period.
So with that as the backdrop, I would recommend that we do that. We go back, we do as suggested, that we announce it. It's not as though we don't count anything that didn't happen prior to the announcement up until the deadline. It's the work that we've all should have been doing all along in terms of wellness that would benefit us.
And then be ready to go out for 1/1/2/3.
Okay.
I would
Commissioner Zimmer.
I would concur with that, in giving everybody time to make the turn. And I would also hope, and I'm certain we would, look at other agencies like our sheriff's department and others that may already have a program in place that may expedite our ability to piggyback on an existing contract. Whether that makes sense or not, we should at least consider it. And I'd also look at, there may be players out there that have the analytics that may provide the analytics as part and parcel of a contractual agreement.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner, then Commissioner.
Thank you. Christina, at one point, we did talk about the data and about updating the website, and Florida Blue was supposed to be doing that. Has any of that happened? That was done about a year ago. We had that conversation.
I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to.
We talked about the analytics and about updating some of the data for it and actually having that available, because I know we had conversations about that in a work session a little over a year ago. Is any of that?
The audit, the claims audit?
Wasn't more, it was actually the analytics about getting people to understand what their information was. We had that in a work session about a year ago.
I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure what data. When Florida Blue comes and gives the update as to...
Florida Blue is supposed to update their website, or their website that we can actually look at, if I remember right.
Member wellness. Okay. Member wellness is, I think, what we're talking about.
I'm so sorry, I don't have any recollection.
Commissioner Hurd.
I don't know whether or not, I'm actually now a member. I haven't looked at it. I'm going to own that.
Okay.
Just like
But we did have that
McDonald's
conversation
drive-thru.
about a year
We did have
ago.
the conversation. These are two different conversations,
Right, I
though.
understand
So I don't know whether they did that. I'll download the app and figure it out. but the ability to look at where you are in terms of your own health status. I do believe that they made improvements to that. I think the difference is the connectivity to the wellness program that tracks to be able to do a payroll deduction.
Okay,
all
so
has to
I'm sorry,
connect.
I think when we talked about that, now I'm remembering I know what you're referring to now. So I think when we originally talked about them updating, so if I log into my Florida Blue, and I can, look at my claims and, my doctor's visits, I think the conversation at that time was, there was a tie to Better Strides to You, which was the Florida Blues Wellness Program. So they were going to, my understanding, if I recall now, is that they were going to try to tie those two things together, so you could see your wellness from the Better Strides to You program.
So I'm not imagining it.
I'm sorry, I wasn't 100% sure where you were going with that, but the Better Strides to You program it didn't get off the ground at that time. I believe that they're getting back on track with that, but I think the platform that they were using was no longer supported. So the intention was at that time that we were actually going to have employees use the Better Strides to You platform to do their wellness, to do the biometrics. Their doctor's physician visits would automatically get uploaded to that. So it made sense that the Florida Better Strides would talk to your Florida Blue member login. But like I said, it didn't end up happening, so there isn't anything for it to connect to right. Well, I shouldn't say that at that time there was not anything for it to connect to. I believe that they're getting back to the Better Strides.
So when you talk to Florida Blue, whoever you speak to, can you ask why it didn't happen?
Yes. Yeah, like I said, I think it was a platform support issue, but yes, I'll try to get more detail.
I'm just trying to understand the whole picture.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to get more detail on what happened with that relationship.
Just to be clear, that's a different analytics that I
Yep.
was referring to.
Commissioner Herr.
I'm going to pull it back to that. So the notion of data analytics, that truly does have to be carrier agnostic, because even if the carrier or vendor or third-party administrator, even if you go to as sort of close to home as you can get and out of the big universe of Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, referred to in our industry as BUCA, you still don't really have your data. When you extract the data in through a data analytics platform and they house it in a data warehouse, it is now yours, meaning accessible.
Right.
Forget contractually,
Right.
meaning accessible, and then it's extractable in an interpretable fashion, which is different from, we do have the data. The data comes through when they pull the money out of the bank account,
Right.
but it's not usable.
Right.
We would have to actually build a system to be able to interpret it.
Decode their
This
code.
becomes all, for the record, de-identified. There's no individual identifiers in it if you do it well.
Right.
So there's no risk of HIPAA violations. But we could actually track where we are in terms of population health management, which will improve the health and well-being of the families that are enrolled. It's a really cool thing. We need to put that into the budget, by the way. It's not free.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I guess to finish up, I have no problem moving forward, but I just think since we paused the medical wellness, we need to ease back into it, because everyone's been off of, we've had paused it for 12, 13 months now. And I think that it would be advantageous for us to ease into it instead of just jumping right back and doing a hard start October 1. That's my only comment.
Commissioner Lockhart.
So given how the pause was explained and that the easing back in does sound like an easing back in, I'm comfortable with your recommendation.
Yeah, since it's the same as 2019, and just as many people that have not walked and have not ridden bicycles during the pandemic, there's an equal amount that have done more. And I, like Commissioner Delory, may have gained 5 pounds, but, no, I've gained 5 pounds. But, I think that these numbers are, for someone like me, and I'm saying that, I'm, older than anyone else up there, but I can meet these numbers. So I think that this is something that we could continue to move forward and stay, since we're keeping it the same as 19. So I think you've got a consensus.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you need, Christina or Nicole?
There's nothing else I need. I will just make sure, we want people to be healthy, we want them to go through the right channels, but, because there was the pause, we will certainly be communicating the reasonable alternative standards. So, this was a different year, so we'll make sure that we communicate that to employees.
And Christina, you got your directions, you better get out of here.
Thank you.
I would ask that we could have that in a motion, just so it's clear, because I know you went down the line, but,
Okay,
So moved.
We're in a work session.
we're in a work session.
well, some sort of definite, because you kind of went down the line. I
Okay,
just want to make sure we got
everybody
it.
that wants to continue with the program that has had, just raise your hand. Okay, you got,
All right, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
all righty.
Could I ask one more thing?
Yes.
The other issue that you talked about is going to market. Is that something that you want us, is that direction from the board today to start that process?
I'd want to wait.
I'm for that.
The answer is yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you, appreciate that.
You're not
So
gonna get the date.
Nicole, you have direction, correct?
Got it.
And Christina, you have
Yes, I
direction.
have direction. Thank you.
Mr. Cook, Mr. Fox, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's good to see you all here.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move real quickly into the next.
Can we take a recess, please?
Sure we can. You want a 10-minute recess?
Sure.
Okay, 10-minute recess.
Stretch your legs, get our wellness back in gear.
Check our cholesterol. the second workshop is going to be the second impact fee workshop. The staff will discuss the extraordinary circumstances necessitating the need to exceed the impact percentage increase limitations set by the bill just signed by the governor, House Bill 337. So with that, I see that Ms. Hammack, you are at the desk. I will turn it over to you.
Good morning. For the record, Rebecca Hammack, Development Services Director. Myself, as well as the directors from Leisure Services, Fire and Rescue, Water and Wastewater, and as well as our consultants are here to do the presentation this morning. And the item before you is a workshop. It's our second workshop on the extraordinary circumstances necessitating the need for the impact fee increases that exceed the limitation that's set forth in the new legislation. This is actually the third workshop before the Board of County Commissioners on the impact fees themselves, but it is the second workshop in order to meet the criteria of the new legislation. So the first slide is just to summarize some of the public outreach that we've done so far with this effort. And we have incorporated feedback from public outreach into the ordinances, some of the feedback that we've received via email, as well as the feedback from the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we have had 3 Citizens Advisory Committees, one on April 9th, May 4th, and June 1st. We did have the Planning and Zoning Commission to review the proposed ordinances, and we provided them the resolution for the water and wastewater just for informational purposes. They did unanimously recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending and updating the library impact fees and the fire impact fees. They did unanimously recommend denial of the mobility impact fee ordinance. However, they did clarify their motion at the end of the meeting, saying that they do believe the proposed mobility fee in concept, replacing the road impact fee, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And as I stated earlier, we did have a BCC workshop on April 13th, and the first workshop we had regarding the extraordinary circumstances was on May 18th. And throughout the process, we've also emailed various representatives from the development community, advising them of the impact fee updates and advising them of the workshop meetings. So at the time of print, the proposed legislation for House Bill 337 had not been signed, but as Commissioner Constantine stated, the governor did sign it into law late Friday, so it is now law. Part of the requirement for the legislation is to have the 2 publicly noticed workshops dedicated to the extraordinary circumstances necessitating the need to exceed the 50% increase limitation. So this is the second workshop to meet that criteria. So I'm going to cover some of the general extraordinary circumstances that we believe the county has with regard to the impact fee increases, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of the department directors to go over the specifics for their impact fee type and also our consultants. So on the first slide, what we believe is an extraordinary circumstance is the growth within the county. We have a large population in high-growth county. We rank 13th out of the 67 Florida counties in population. We have addition of 110,000 new residents projected through 2045. We rank 17th in absolute population growth. We rank 25th in annual population growth with 0.9%. And we rank 23rd in residential permitting out of all the 67 counties. The other extraordinary circumstance is that we have not updated our impact fees since the early 1990s. The water and wastewater connection fees were last updated in 2002. We do need an additional infrastructure and facilities and services to meet our population growth. Otherwise, if we don't, what happens is the existing population subsidizes new growth and the level of service degrades. If we do increase our impact fees, then growth will pay for its fair share. The other general extraordinary circumstances are that the impact fee would maintain affordability of property taxes and user rates, and it's a fairness issue associated with subsidization of growth by current taxpayers and utility customers. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Droz to speak specifically on fire and rescue.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Otto Droz, Fire Chief, Seminole County Fire Department. Our extraordinary circumstances really have to do with the infrastructure needs of the fire department in order to maintain the level of service that has been realized within Seminole County. In addition to the stations that you have on the board, Station 39, which is which will be located on First Street and Orange Boulevard. We also have Station 28, which will be located at the area of 417 and 434 in the Winter Springs area to account for the high growth within that area and the projected high growth within that area, as well as Station 19 that's listed on the board, which we own property on Lake Emma and Longwood Hills Road to make up some of the stagger within that area or gaps within service within that area. In addition to those three stations that are included within our fire forecast, we have Station 11 that is being built now. We have Station 25 on Wilshire and 434. And when we look at impact fees, they're not only for new growth, but they're for the expansion or expanding the service levels within existing fire stations or building our capacity. So Station 25 is eligible. We're looking at rebuilding Station 23 in the Winter Park area, in the Howell Branch area there, as well as Station 35 in the Five Points area. Now, when we look at extraordinary growth within fire rescue services, if we just go back to the time that the last time that the impact fees were increased, our population has grown by over 64%. In the same time period, our call volume has grown by 100%, and the only infrastructure that we've added is Station 29 in 2018. So if we look at what the impact of what we're asking you to do would be, because we haven't increased them in such a long time, if you look at Station 39 as an example, with the increased fees, we would pay off Station 39's cost in 7 years instead of 18 years. The current fee generates about $420,000 per year, and historically has accounted for 13% of our infrastructure costs. With the increase, it'll go somewhere between $550 to $950 and make up 20% of the capacity. Now, you would imagine that because the fee is increasing at the rate that it's increasing, that it would make up a larger percentage, but because of the infrastructure needs and because we've only built Station 28 in that previous period is why it's only making up 26% and not a higher percentage of the total capital costs. Now, the only other thing of note would be because of the consolidations with Altamont Springs, with Winter Springs, and Castleberry, they would have to meet the provisions of House Bill 337 as well. That's the end of my portion, and I'll turn it over to, I believe, Leisure Services Director Richter.
Mr. Chairman?
Before we go on, we're going to have each one, somebody question. So questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Droz, I appreciate your effort and your presentation. I believe that this is just my opinion, the impact fees for the fire side is definitely warranted. I fully support it. The question I had the last time, which I haven't heard any response yet to it, was that since you talked about the call volume going up, you said 100%? I think that's what
That's right. Over 100%.
Over 100%. This impact fee does not address dispatch, correct?
It does not, because dispatch is within the general fund side. Everything that we're talking about right now is on the MST or the fire fund side.
So what's the plans for the impact fees or creating an impact fee for the dispatch side? Because as you just said, it's gone up over 100%, and it should, new growth should pay for that as well instead of the general fund.
That's right, and that's something that we would have to look at separate and apart from this process.
Okay.
And we did take your comments the last time, and that's something that, once we get past this, we'll start following up on that as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Anyone else on fire rescue? All right, thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Durr, you're up, Leisure Services.
Good morning. For the record, Richard Durr, Leisure Services Director for Seminole County. Conversely to the discussion with fire, the impact fees for libraries are really centered upon the ability for us to grow our collection of information that's available to our residents. So it isn't brick and mortar, it's the information contained, whether it's digital, whether it's hard copy, the books that you find on the shelf, and those services that we make available to our residents through our library system. So the question is what's the extraordinary circumstance that we're looking at within the library impact fee? So specifically, the library impact fee is one that was established back in 1992, and it has not been adjusted since then. So just looking at things such as what's the buying power of that $54 fee per unit that was originally set into motion 30 years ago, clearly that's not the same anymore today. But that being said, in the total context of our library system, what is the actual dollar value that we collected last year, for example? So with the impact fee, we collected around $120,000. Should this be updated, we're looking at an increase of anywhere projected to be $350,000 to $500,000 annually as a new level that we'd be collecting. Now, in the whole scheme of things in the county's budget, that may not be gigantic, but in terms of our ability and our buying power to stay relevant and to stay current with our library system, that could make a tremendous impact going forward. So when we look at level of service and the level of service that we're trying to maintain for our residents, first thing we start with is, well, are folks using the library system? And as we've shown this graph before, folks in this county use the library system to a greater extent than any of our neighbors that we see. We are very proud of, and we have a lot of residents very proud of the fact that our library system is very well used and continues to be well loved, as you've heard from a lot of our residents. Conversely, as we continue to grow, however, if we do not adjust the rate of collection of impact fees as one of the ways that we stay current, we will basically see a decline in level of service. And that's basically the availability of the information that we have at our libraries. We cannot stay current and buy enough of to keep pace with the growth and with the demand on our overall library system. So to the extent that where we stand both for the weight that our residents have for things such as ebooks, the current, just out of FYI, the current state average for the wait on ebooks is about 47 days, so our folks are waiting longer. Our materials hold is pretty extensive, and it would be great if, all things being equal, if costs had at least stayed current with inflation. And that's not what we've seen in the library world, in the publishing world. So we've seen a 47% rise in just costs, hard copy costs over the last 5 years. We've seen an increase in the cost of ebooks, and just so that you know, it isn't as simple as purchasing an ebook on your Kindle. For a library system, about 2/3 of our library costs about over $50 just for a single copy because of the number of users that it will continue to have. And then lastly, again, if funding had remained stable, that would be one thing, but we've seen the funding available to us through the state has continued to decline. So our population goes up, our needs go up, the funding availability goes down, and the cost goes up, which is an inverse, unfortunately, reaction, and we see a decrease in the level of service. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Anybody on library? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, the only
Yes?
question I have is, Rick, when is the master plan for the library due to come back?
That will be, well, you'll be involved early on. Right now, we're selecting the consultant that's in the purchasing process, so my guess would be probably 3 to 4 or 5 months or so, we'll be meeting with you early in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Excuse me, sir, before we start this, I know this is on water and wastewater. I've been asked, the mayor of Oviedo has to leave at 11:15, and that is correct. And I would just like to give deference to her and allow her to speak from the public comment form. So Mayor Sladek, you are, and I know this is not on this particular one, it's on the mobility fee, correct?
It is. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Megan Sladek, Mayor of Oviedo. I want to commend you guys for taking steps to navigate around the state level new law that's in place. We in Oviedo are looking forward to making sure that the developers carry their own weight. We're also looking forward to having our own mobility fee, which would then remove us from the need to collect the county's mobility fee. And I know our staffs have been interacting on that, and I just wanted to bring to your attention some language that we would like inserted and make sure that you guys heard it directly. And it's for section 120.3, subsection G, subsection 1. And if you'll humor me, I'll just go ahead and read it so you know what it is we're talking about. It reads like this. As of the date of the adoption and effective date of this ordinance, the City of Oviedo and the Oviedo Community Redevelopment Agency have entered into an intergovernmental interagency agreement providing for the funding and procurement of professional services for the development of a combined mobility plan and mobility fee for the City of Oviedo. Upon completion of such study and the development of the municipal mobility fee for the City of Oviedo that addresses improvements to the county's mobility system within and in proximity to the boundaries of the City of Oviedo, in coordination with Seminole County, and upon the adoption of an ordinance establishing the Oviedo Municipal Mobility Fee and incorporated into the Oviedo Comprehensive Plan, lands being developed or redeveloped in the City of Oviedo shall no longer be required to pay the mobility fee calculated and collected by Seminole County pursuant to this ordinance or any replacement of this ordinance, but shall instead pay to the City of Oviedo the mobility fee amount set forth in the Oviedo Municipal Mobility Fee. And it goes on from there. That's the main thing you need to know. And the concern with staff seems to be that this is a self-executing provision that would allow Oviedo to just automatically, as soon as we have an ordinance in place that enacts a mobility fee similar to what Altamont Springs has, that we would be treated just as Altamont Springs is. So I just want to point out that this language, as far as our attorneys are concerned, contemplates that we would use the same methodology to do the mobility fee, that we would accept all of the county-level projects that run through Oviedo as our responsibility. And if we do all of the things that match what Altamont Springs has done to get their situation, we would ask that you would include this language and find a way to allow our investment of about $250,000 in doing our own mobility fee to just magically happen without having to go through all this again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and I wanted to add one little caveat to that in addition to that, what Altamont Springs does that you would be responsible for is the paying for the county projects that would be in the city.
Absolutely, and that's what I was just clarifying, that we have a list, the list already exists. We know what the county is covering that comes through our borders, and we would have to accept that. So we can create a list in advance of this ordinance passing, knowing what Oviedo would be responsible for.
And we know that the staff and your staff are working together, and you still have a representative here as you leave.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may ask the mayor a question, if I may, Mayor?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I know about a year ago, our board has asked our staff to speak to your staff regarding not just an interlocal agreement, but an interlocal agreement on transportation, hence what we're talking about here. And I just want to make sure that we're moving forward with those agreements, and that if there's any issues, please let us know.
Definitely will do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Terry, thank you very much. We're going to go to water, wastewater.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brian Mance from GovRates, and I'm here to talk about the extraordinary circumstances of the water and wastewater capacities. Basically, the extraordinary circumstances are, of course, the county must fund additional water and wastewater capacity to support growth, but to the extent that utility capacity fees are not right-sized to fair amounts, the county must increase user rates to make up the difference. With lower capacity collections, the county has to issue additional debt to fund the additional capacity, and the county incurs additional interest and issuance costs. And based on the calculated capacity fees, the current utility customers are subsidizing growth by an estimated $2.5 million per year, which is a fairness issue. User rate affordability has been a primary concern of the utility industry for the past several years, even before the pandemic. And certainly within the county's service area, there are senior citizens on fixed income, people affected by the pandemic that just cannot afford to continue subsidizing growth. And certainly when we talk about user rates, the user rates affect the cost of living, and from a user rate increases to commercial customers are passed through into the prices of goods and services and affect the overall cost of living for the county. So the bottom line is that many existing utility customers cannot afford to continue subsidizing growth, and the capacity fee study has identified fairness issues in the amounts charged to be able to provide additional capacity for growth.
Thank you. Any questions on water, wastewater? Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Bill Oliver, talking about mobility fee. So yes, similar to the other fee ordinances, the mobility fee or your current roadway impact fee has not been updated since 1995 or reviewed since that time. I think the calculations were actually done back in 1990, and 95 just endorsed them. The key issues is that your current road impact fee is way out of date. It does not reflect the principles for mobility fees that have been established in state law. And currently your revenue program overall for transportation mobility expansion does not adequately fund the adopted plan program. So the implementation of this mobility fee will fill that gap so you can continue to operate and meet the goals that you've set for your community. Next slide, please. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Here, I have a, thanks. I can do it myself. Okay, good. I'll find the right button here. There we go. So the calculational procedures of your current road impact fee are out of date compared to what other communities do. It does not incorporate the length of trip as a component of measuring system consumption. And the fees are extraordinarily low. I missed one. Yeah, the obsolete methodologies. And failure to incorporate the trip length into the calculation introduces inequities in how you're treating different land uses. So the current fee incorporates the trip length variable, making the fee more equitable between different types of land uses. The current fee is not based on your current transportation plan, and that's one of the fundamental requirements, is that your mobility fee should be based on your current mobility plan. And elements of that include designation of a transit-enhanced area, which we are calling the core district of your mobility fee, and recognition of the rural protection area out to the eastern part of your county, which is also incorporated into this proposed fee. The current fee program doesn't recognize the sales tax program that you've implemented to help fund infrastructure, whereas this fee does. So, we've talked about the trip lengths already. Bottom line is your current fees are extraordinarily low compared to surrounding agencies, and so that's another extraordinary situation you are in. And then the House Bill 337 restrictions on fee increases will slow down the rate at which you can correct some of the inequities that exist in your fee program. So we think the adoption of the fee it can be justified under the extraordinary circumstances provisions of House Bill 337.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions? All right. Rebecca?
Sure. So before we conclude this segment of the work session, I just want to go back to the Citizens Advisory Committee. I believe we do have some members here from the Citizens Advisory Committee in the audience, but they did ask me to bring to the attention of the board a couple of the comments from the last meeting with them. And generally, I believe the Citizens Advisory Committee believes that the proposed rates are reasonable. However, they did indicate that they do believe it would have a negative impact on business contracts, and that it could decrease the affordability of residential in development in general and within the county, and also have a negative impact on business moving forward due to the increased impact fee prices. So they did, and also one of the Citizens Advisory Committee members did also mention, would the commission consider phasing rather than implementing them all at one time? So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. And with that, that concludes the portion regarding the extraordinary circumstances. And if it's okay with the commission, I would like to move forward with just a couple of policy questions related to the proposed ordinances.
Please continue.
So for the fire, the mobility, and the library impact fee ordinances, we are including a section that would define affordable housing and also provide a separate land use category for affordable housing. And currently, we are proposing that that would apply to the 80% AMI population, so the population with a income of 80% AMI, that the affordable housing would have mortgages, including taxes and utilities, no more than 30% of their income. And so the policy question that arose at the last work session is related to, do we want to expand that AMI threshold to 140%, which would include workforce housing? That was also a question that came up at the Citizens Advisory Committee a couple of meetings ago. So, and Rick is actually going to put up on the overhead what the difference in income would be between the 80% and the 140%.
Okay, that's beautiful.
I need binoculars.
A chance to zoom in.
Can you, all right, you might have to go
Sure.
through that.
So at the top of the spreadsheet, which isn't shown on the screen, it's income per the number of people within the household. So just as an example, if at the 80% AMI for a 4-person household, the household income, the maximum is $61,040. And if you increase it to the 140% AMI, the household income is at a four-person household is $106,820. So at that, you're looking at a monthly mortgage plus taxes and utilities of around $2,670 if we went to the 140%.
What would it be at 120?
That's my question.
So 120.
It's between the two of them.
Yeah, so the 120 is for a 4-person, the income threshold is $91,560. So if you bear with me, I can do some math here. So that would be $2,289 per month.
Okay, so the policy question here is, there was discussion at the last one about 80 to 140. They brought forth both of those, the 22.2 and the 2.4, when you said on both of those, that's still under the 30% that is recommended. I believe.
So the definition currently for affordable housing, so it would be 30%, so the maximum mortgage plus taxes and utilities or the rental would be 30% of the income threshold, which is the 80% of the AMI. So the recommendation was, do we want to expand that to 140% to open it up for more workforce housing, so they would also be eligible for that lower impact fee rate? And so, if we do go to 140%, that represents a monthly mortgage plus utilities and taxes of like a little over $2,000.
Okay. Commissioner Zimbauer, then Commissioner Lockhart. Anyone else? Okay, then Commissioner Delory, then Commissioner Hurd, then Commissioner Constantine. Okay.
So a couple questions. I think
Came down the road.
what Commissioner Delory, I think, may have been asking was, why did we go from 80 to 140 and not from 80 to 120? What was the
That's the first question.
It's just a
support for
discussion,
that?
guys.
140 is the maximum. It to still be eligible as affordable housing.
So what thought has been given, regardless of what we do to that and decision we make, in affordability long-term? Meaning, if you've reduced the impact fees to have workforce housing or more workforce housing, which we certainly need, how do we prevent a situation where someone comes in, they qualify, they've purchased it under the reduced impact fee, and then 2 years later, they flip the house and move on? We have a criteria in place.
Yes, and that's a great question. And that was something that we actually spoke to our consultants about, because they brought up that same concern. With the affordable housing, we, under the definition, under the criteria that we're setting within the ordinance, is that you would have to have a deed restriction of an affordability period of 30 years. So if we do expand that to then workforce housing, would we also want to then apply that deed restriction to workforce housing of the 30-year minimum affordability period?
I mean, I don't know what the flavor of my fellow commissioners is going to be, but if we're going to change the fee, and if we're going to incentivize workforce housing and affordable housing, then we should, in my mind, do that for at least some reasonable time frame to ensure that it does stay in affordable and workforce housing. That's all I have. I'll listen to my fellow commissioners' inquiries.
Commissioner Lockhart, Commissioner Delory, then Commissioner Hurd.
So a developer would have a choice if they wanted to, even if they were building workforce housing, they would have a choice if they wanted to have the lower impact fees and implement that deed restriction?
That's correct. They could just choose to pay the higher standard rate, either for multifamily or single family.
And then, I sort of use teachers, first-year teachers, as my metric of what can a first-year teacher afford. So if you had two teachers married to one another, they each make $47,000 a year is the new threshold for a first-year teacher. That's $94,000. That $120,000 for a family of four, they would not be eligible. And I'm sure there are other very worthy, wonderful professions that I could use, but teachers happen to be mine. So I'm not excluding anybody else, but that's just, when I look at that, I think, wow, going to 140 to me would not be a bad thing.
Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with both the statements from the two fellow commissioners. The question that I would have for our staff is, how does this affect the utilities or the other impacts that we're looking to put in the ground, so to speak, the infrastructure? How does that affect that?
So I believe from the last work session, you had asked a similar question on the revenue implications of if we were, to have the lower rate, which we are proposing. And these, of course, are just estimates, but based on the research from our consultants, the affordable housing usually only represents 1, maximum 2% of your total units permitted within a year. So I did some rough calculations, and based on that, we're looking at, so we permit probably on average 1,800 to 2,000 units per year. So if we're only looking at 1% or 2% of total residential units, we're looking at 40 units that would meet the actual definition of of affordable housing as we've defined it now. So we're looking at about 40 units. So that would represent a reduction in revenue for impact fees of approximately $73,000. And so if we did expand it then to workforce housing, the percentage would probably likely increase to about 5 to 7%. And of course, these are just estimates. There's no guarantee that we'll actually have developers come in and develop affordable or workforce housing. So if we expand it to the 5%, then, which is around 90 to 100 units per year, we're looking at a revenue reduction of about $165,000.
Is that across all impact fees or just total?
That's across all impact fees except for schools. I did not include schools because that has not been changed yet to reflect a different land use category for affordable housing. And it also does not include water and wastewater because we do not have a provision within the connection fees, capacity fees for affordable housing due to the bonding language.
So that would go for libraries, fire, roads,
Exactly. Yes,
parks,
those
et
three.
cetera. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hurd?
Can you take me through that math again? 1% equals $75,000, 5% equals 170?
Sure. So I took the average number of units that we permit in a year, and based on the research from our consultant and they said that it's approximately 1 to 2% of affordable units are built within a community. So I multiplied the 1,800 times, I think I did 2% just to be a maximum, and it was about 36 units, so I rounded to 40 units. And then I took the lower rate for the impact fees and multiplied it by that number of units, and then took the difference on what it would be under the standard rate. So we're only looking at a reduction of about, maximum $73,000, $75,000.
So it was a 2 to 5, not a 1 to 5. What's the significance of 30 years? And can we, to Commissioner Zimbauer's point, would you do workforce versus affordable with different timeframes?
We could. The 30 years is the standard time for a mortgage, and so that was what was thought, I guess, just sort of an industry standard for the time period. And it was also something that also came out of a recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Committee. And we're recommending the 50 years if for a complete waiver of the impact fees.
That's the next question that you've got on.
Exactly.
Okay,
And-
Commissioner Lockhart, I think that you would say.
Let's get the.
Well, I just want to move this along. Here's where I'm coming from, I believe. I think we've really analyzed this 80%. We have made a commitment by this, in this community, by this commission, that we were really going to attack and try to find ways to improve our affordable housing situation. Adding this workforce, not that I'm opposed to it, but I think it needs a little bit more research so that we really have the full implication. I want to know if we could include it in the ordinance when it comes back, or would this, if this is our only chance, could we also do it at a later date, since we have to do it, we only can update it once every 4 years, but could we put it in and as a provision later? Or could we do it, could we get some information by the time we do the ordinance so we can, put it embedded into the ordinance?
So we could do whatever the board wants. I would throw out another suggestion.
Okay, that's why I'm looking at you.
So we have language in here that the impact fees will be reviewed every, how many years? Every 4 years. We have ARPA funding coming that can be used for affordable housing. And one of the things that we're looking at from a staff standpoint is funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund with ARPA dollars. So we could use that as opposed to having something in the impact fees this go around. We could do a program through the ARPA funds to help subsidize impact fees as a way to incentivize affordable housing and not do anything in the ordinance this time, see how that works. And then when we come back in 4 years and revise the impact fee ordinance, you would have an idea of how much of an impact that actually has on the community. Just another opportunity. I don't, certainly I'm just throwing that out at you right now, but we've been trying to figure out what we're going to do with ARPA funds, and this is one of the things we're talking about. So that might be another avenue to provide incentives with respect to impact fees, because you can certainly use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to subsidize impact fees. It would give you a good idea, without impacting your ordinance right now, as to what sort of impact it might have, both financially from an infrastructure standpoint, but also how much of an incentive it might actually be to provide affordable housing. Just another option. But if you want more information, if you want to do it now, we can certainly get you whatever additional information you want.
Well, to finish my thought, I really think that we have discussed and have been, I think from the very beginning, we've been talking about the 80%, affordable housing. I think that what you're doing might be more appropriate in the workforce, and we could really look and see how much. But if the policy question is the board want to expand the definition to include workforce housing to 140%, at this moment, I would rather get a little bit more information before I say yes, but I definitely want to move forward on the 80%. Commissioner Lockhart, then Commissioner Zimbauer.
I guess the reason I'm interested in expanding to the workforce housing is that we hear all the time that we don't have workforce housing. There's a lot of programs out there available for affordable, but it's this workforce middle that seems to be lacking in our community. So I'm willing to throw it out there and try it. Also love the idea of the ARPA funds. I hear regularly, and I love the two recommendations and the words of caution from the committee about, this might affect affordability and phasing. So I'll start with phasing. Phasing is something I personally would certainly consider. The affordability piece is interesting to me because our impact fees that have not been increased in this realm since 1990 are not what's contributing to the lack of affordability in our community now. We have other communities that surround us that have exorbitantly higher impact fees than we do, and people go and buy houses there and not here because the houses in those communities are less expensive. So I have a hard time just in the logic sequence, understanding how us bringing our impact fees up to what would be market somehow suddenly makes us unaffordable when you can get a house in Osceola County for a lot less money, but their impact fees are already higher. So if someone from staff can help me square that away in my brain, that would be, I would appreciate that.
No, I think you're right on target on that one, Commissioner Zimbauer.
Well, I mean, some of my inquiries follow along with my good friend Commissioner Lockhart, in that we heard in the presentation some of these fees haven't been updated for 20 years, some of them have been 30 years. So my first question is, how have we gotten along this far? How have we survived? So I'd like to know how that's been supplemented, because we weren't charging, maybe what I think I'm hearing is updating our impact fees. How has this county survived for the last 20 or 30 years on the impact fees that have existed since the mid-'90s? Secondary to that, we've had a discussion. This is somewhat intertwines to the discussion that we've had in how do we incentivize developers to give us affordable housing and workforce housing. We've talked about community land trusts. We've talked about all these other things. We have funded, I think, with $500,000 initially seed money, which we all know is not going to go very far. We've talked to nonprofits. We've done all these things. I think we should be looking very strongly at the 140, 120 as yet another way to incentivize these developers to give us this product, instead of us mandating or legislating a certain thing. It's another carrot to, give a certain portion. And the long-term affordability, I think our folks from Community Services would support that. A 30-year affordability is pretty standard fare. Community land trusts and all those other things sort of follow that same model. And of course, we all know the ideology, which is get somebody in there, and if they can move on, better themselves, or moving to a different place, then we have another. It doesn't get off the market, doesn't get removed from the inventory for affordable and workforce housing. The other benefit that we should consider from the affordability from workforce housing. To Commissioner Lockhart's point, you don't have to go very far south of here and find one of the most expensive impact fees in the nation. And their community is booming with development. Now, there's obviously other reasons for that and so forth, but at the end of the day, we have to consider if we're going to have our workers and our affordable housing product outside of this county, now we're putting more burden on the infrastructure. We're traveling more. We're creating a quality of life issues for our employees that our retailers want to work for them. So there's a benefit of not burdening the infrastructure as well as the quality of life if a family's mother and father can just drive 5 or 10 miles within this county to work instead of coming from another county at 20 or 30 miles and waiting in traffic for an hour and a half, I think is a much better quality of life and pays dividends in so many fronts that I would support going to the 140, and I think that conversation should be had at this juncture, in my mind, whether we stay at 80 or 140, so we don't burden staff and have to go back and re-look at this 4 years from now. We've been talking about the Affordable Housing and Community Land Trust since Commissioner Lockhart and I arrived here in 2018. We've made some steps and strides, but we still don't have a product. We don't have a plan. It's not moving yet. So I would only ask my fellow commissioners to consider this as another incentive, another part of the puzzle of how we get to where we ultimately want to be with those needs.
Anyone? Commissioner Hurd.
I think the only thing left out of that conversation is that it changes the community as well for the better, to have police, fire, teachers living next door to people in our neighborhoods and not having to travel over the bridge in either direction to get here. So I would be supportive of this as well, in addition to the fact that the time to do this is now. It wouldn't be a takeaway. We would still be gaining additional funds for infrastructure in the current iteration. We just wouldn't be gaining as much. To gain more and try to take it away later becomes even more burdensome and difficult because, as we all know, we become reliant on the funds that come in. So if we're going to do this, the time to do it, from my perspective, is now.
I believe then that we have, yes, Commissioner Delord.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with my fellow commissioners as well as the suggestion that the county manager made about the ARPA funds, and I'd like to see it move forward.
All right, so we've got a consensus here that you need 140. I think that the provisions that you put into those, as that requirements, are certainly not going to be the same as you're putting into affordable housing. Is that, what are you looking at as far as the provisions?
So for the, yes, so the provisions would be the same. We would just expand the definition to 140% of AMI.
Okay.
But it would still require the 30-year affordability period.
Okay, so the next, I'm moving to the,
So then, okay, so on the...
you will give us some true revenue implications, just so we have that for the, for knowledge.
Well, so we can only give estimates at this point, and that's, I provided some rough estimates, just because we don't know. We're doing this as an incentive, as Commissioner Zembauer said, to try to incentivize developers to develop affordable and workforce housing in the county, but by requiring a lower impact fee rate. However, we don't really know in reality how many applications we're going to get for that type of development.
And Rebecca, I'm not trying to continue this. I'm just trying to say is, you did it, with the calculator right here. I'm just saying, if you go back and kind of like look at it and just let us know, I would appreciate it.
With a different calculator.
Yeah.
Sure. So I did
more numbers.
Yeah, and I was calculating I was calculating the 120%. I did calculate the workforce housing based on the 5 to 7% of workforce housing, and based on those numbers, we are looking at a reduction of $165,000. Again, that's only me a rough estimate. It could be zero. We could have no affordable or workforce housing, applications come in. But if we had the 5%, it would be a reduction in revenues of $165,000. And of course, that's based on estimates of the, average annual residential permits that we get in a year.
Commissioners, if we look at the ARPA funds, it could be basically not costing the general fund any money.
And I agree with that. I just didn't want, Rebecca to feel like she had to do it immediately off the top of her head with a calculator. I just wanted to make
No,
sure
thank
that she
you.
had the opportunity to do it. Okay, other things.
So, and just to clarify before we move into the next item, in the discussion about the definition of affordable housing, that is to qualify for the reduced rate, which is approximately half of the standard rate in most cases for most of the impact fee types. It's not a complete waiver. The Florida statutes allows you to do a complete waiver. However, there are still impacts associated with affordable housing. The impacts don't go away. They're still there, but we are reducing it to try to incentivize. We're not saying there's no impacts. It's just, it's an incentive.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Zimbauer.
On that note, I'm glad that you brought that up, Ms. Hammack. Would my fellow commissioners possibly entertain tiering the impact fee for the amount of affordability? Meaning, if we're going to consider doing half, if we had a developer that would come in and say, build 100%, would you all consider dropping that to a quarter, 25% of the impact fee? Or some kind of tiered additional incentive for affordability?
I'd have to think about it.
Commissioner Lockhart, then Commissioner.
Well,
Yes,
I
wait a
think
minute.
there's other
Go.
implications maybe to that. I'm willing to think about anything, but
So two things. What Rebecca's about to describe to you is somewhat of a tiering waiver if you do a longer affordability period. But you could also, that's another thing that you could look at the ARPA funds to do as well, if you wanted to pursue that.
I don't have a problem with the idea of the tiering at all. I just, when you say if they do 100%, are you saying 100% of the product? So if they're building 100 homes, all 100 homes have to be in that range? Or I just wasn't sure what you meant.
Something, I mean, I'm not saying 100%, but maybe it could be 60%. There's going to be occasions, and we already have this, as we know, where we may have 40-unit complex come in and they're dedicating 10% of that to be affordable, et cetera, et cetera. So under the current, what we've just said is that 10% would get the reduced half impact fee. But if we said to those developers, hey, if you would do 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, or 100%, would we be interested in tiering, reducing the impact fee as an incentive for doing more of that?
Commissioner Hurd?
My initial gut instinct is no, for this reason. I like the notion of variability in a community. I think kids grow up differently by seeing different portions of our population in their own orbit, as opposed to creating a 100% affordable housing neighborhood that is the only thing that they see until they get out of the neighborhood and get to school. I think the burden that puts on the parents that are trying to change the trajectory of young people, to try to change generational poverty, and this could be because of where I grew up, and I grew up in it, that I would rather see somebody build a neighborhood that has components of all walks of life in the neighborhood, because I think that changes our community for the better.
And I don't disagree at all. I would only say that there are particular properties that could fall into a category that they otherwise would stay non-developed because of the impact of the developer to do it, that could come into the market as a taxable product for that purpose. I don't suspect we're going to have any developer that's going to come in and really do 100% of any affordable workforce housing just based on the impact fee. But I could see portions thereof.
County Manager?
I have just a comment, if you were going to consider tiering, rather than tiering on the number of units, because I agree with Commissioner Herr about integration, I think that's really important. But you might want to consider tiering for affordable versus workforce, and maybe give a greater discount for affordable housing than for workforce housing, or whatever or if you want to incentivize workforce more, then maybe give a greater,
Yeah.
so I would do it within the types of affordable housing or the price points maybe.
And Commissioners, that's what I was kind of going to. You know, we were changing from 80 to 140. That's okay. I just think that there are opportunities in that if we do it. And whether it's tiering or some other form, I think that we can do that where we know that we've got a real problem in affordable housing. We also know we have a problem in workforce housing. But, you know, I think the greater problem right now is the affordable housing. If we can find a way to tier that to the 140 when it comes to, you know, impact fees, I think that would be a benefit and try to push people, incentivize, as Commissioner Zimbauer has said, to go even further into, or to help even more subsidize those homes that are going to be affordable, to the affordable housing level. Commissioner Delory.
Thank you. I agree with all the things that we're trying to do up here. I'd like to see more definition and more of an example. I like the idea of the tier structure, as well as what we need to have financial diversity, so to speak. I don't know how else to explain it. But more importantly, I think that if we could look at a product where we're talking about not just affordable, but workforce, and looking at that from different tiers, maybe as the chairman spoke about, as well as the county manager, I'd like to see some examples of it so I can think about it a little bit in depth, but I'm not opposed to it.
Ladies, I think we've got a consensus on trying to look at some tiered approach there. The policy question you have before us, does the commission wish to have an affordability housing trust fund subsidize the payment of the impact fees or waive the fees entirely with no reimbursement? You know,
And it would only be under these very narrow circumstances. But based on the tiering conversation that just occurred, if I could just throw out perhaps an option, since that if we wanted to do the tiering between affordable housing and workforce housing, maybe we keep the current rate that we have proposed for affordable housing in there for, it's approximately half of the standard rate. We keep that for workforce housing and completely waive the impact fees for affordable housing, and that be subsidized by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, since that's such a really negligible amount of permits that actually come into the county. And then that way, because we do have funding in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund now, and I believe we're also requesting additional funding in next year's budget. So I do believe there would be funding to be able to subsidize that.
County manager, that's good. And I see shake of heads from everybody. So
I would agree with that 100%, and that I think would include.
I think we're getting there.
Our seniors. We can't forget our seniors that we want to keep in our community as well.
Rebecca, great
Affordability.
suggestion. I think we're getting there, and I think we're all seeing that makes a lot of sense, and we're really putting in some incentives. Okay, next question. Yes. Oh, okay.
As the Scrivener, I'd just like a little clarification.
Okay.
Of course you do.
So for the affordable rates between 80% and 140%, those would go at the affordable housing rate that we currently have in the schedule. And then for the affordable housing that is below 80%, that would be a complete waiver.
Yes. Subsidized by the Housing Trust Fund, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
And then
Below 80 or at or below 80?
Well, so it's above 80 would be.
It's 80 or below, isn't it?
80 or below.
Yeah.
That's the way I'll do that. Thank you.
And then in addition to the other two circumstances that would be subsidized as well would be if it was being, or waived, I should say, and then subsidized would be if it's being developed and owned by a community land trust,
Right.
or they commit to a 50-year affordability period.
You know, all that sounds great, and I think we're all agreeing with that. The only thing that I would say as a caveat is I do want to see, you know, now that we're doing the 50% on the 140, what kind of, you know, dollar implication that truly is, and whether or not we want back to subsidizing that, the additional of that to the affordable.
We're really looking at, you know, less than $165,000.
If that's the case,
And, you know, our revenues are over $1 million per year, so it's really a small percentage. And because we have the money within the trust fund to cover it, there really wouldn't be any negative impact to the capital, the CIP.
Yes, County Manager.
If you're, I think we just decided we were going to waive entirely for affordable, do the affordable housing rate for workforce. The 50, these wouldn't come into play then, because if you're doing affordable, we're waiving anyway, correct? So the 50-year isn't, the 50-year in the land trust, because you're already
That's true, good point. Yeah,
providing,
they-
you're already waiving them. So these conditions wouldn't apply under that
Shouldn't.
tiering scenario. Correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah, that's good.
Well, does that mean that somebody comes in and says, we're doing affordable housing, they do affordable housing, but then 20 years later, they change?
50
It'd be
years.
the 30.
No, but it is going to be, that's going to remain.
30 years.
The 30 is going to remain. Okay, I wanted to make sure of that. Okay.
And we're both workforce and affordable.
Okay, good. Anything else? Yes.
I hope that the folks who have done such a great job of developing this community and enjoy developing in this community will see this as will see it as an incentive. And I guess we'll be able to see if all of the rhetoric, you know, now that we've taken that and said, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to go ahead and remove 100% of the remove that, and so now put your money where your mouth is, let's see you develop the product. I mean, honestly, that's kind of what I'm going to be excited to see, whether or not that happens.
Yes. Commissioner Hurt.
I need clarification. I'm surprised you don't need clarification. 30 and 50. So on slide 20, an affordable housing project with a deed restriction having an affordability period of 50 years, but if we said we were waiving it to start out with for 30, 50 goes away.
Yes, correct.
I just want to be clear about that.
So, and I apologize, because when I made the recommendation to just waive the fee for all of affordable, these two subsets would be inclusive of that.
Understood.
All right, next.
The next item is we did want to bring to the commission and the public's attention the vesting provisions that are being proposed with the ordinance that'll be before you on June 22nd. And if I could, I'll have Paul explain those provisions. They are similar to the vesting provisions that we did with the school impact fee.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Chipok, Deputy County Attorney.
Speak into the mic.
Yes,
Paul,
sir.
please, thank you.
For the record, Paul Chipok, Deputy County Attorney. The vesting provisions that we have are similar to what we implemented in 2018 when we did the school impact fees, and that program ran extremely smoothly for what could have been.
Really?
It did. Besides the 2 or 3
We got
appeals.
different phone calls.
Well, Jose, where were you at?
I would say for the about 40 applications that we ran, you only saw maybe 5 or 6 before the board. So it did run. So we're implementing and utilizing the same system. With the effective date of the new fees being June 29th, the adoption date of the ordinance will be June 22nd. So for the affordable, the effective date of the new fees will be the June 29th. The last day to file an application for vested rights would be September 13th. And the vesting certificate would need to be fully executed by September 27th. And the vesting would last for 18 months from the date of this certificate. And again, with vested rights, we're dealing with an equity situation. Case law says that we have the right to change our impact fees when we need to change our impact fees. And we don't have to provide the building permit, the fees that are due are the impact fees that are due on the date of the building permit being pulled. Case law is clear on that. But from an equity standpoint, if somebody has a contract out there, we cannot impair an existing contract. So that is where our vested rights provisions concentrate. So the requirements and background material for the vested rights application are based on the existing contracts that existed as of the date of the adoption of the new ordinance, which would be the June 22nd date.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Paul, can you also put in there when they said pull, you said they have to pull the permit. Can you define what permit has to be pulled? Because that was an issue the last time.
The permit that would be pulled would be the permit that is valid for vertical construction.
I'm okay with it. I want to make sure that whatever it's written so that everyone understands what that permit is.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
And if you wouldn't mind circulating those dates that you just said, seeing that would be helpful for me too.
Commissioner Herr? Yeah.
Yes.
Because the last time we talked about site permits, vertical permits, slab permits, there's all kinds of permits, demo permits.
Commissioner Herr, please.
Why June 22nd for the contract versus June 29th, which is the effective date?
Because the ordinance, we could change it, but from the thought process is that the contracts were in effect before you took action to amend the impact fee rates.
I would advocate for the effective date. I think it's effective this date, that's when it gives an additional week. Let's not have that debate, right? This is giving additional, I think what I'm doing is giving additional ability for someone to go under contract between the time that we take action, that we've been telegraphing that we're taking action for months, so this is not going to create a big bucket of activity, but it will eliminate some confusion in terms of somebody thinking the effective date was the 29th versus the contract had to happen on the 22nd.
Okay, so you would be expanding the pool and allow somebody to put a property under contract after you've taken action to adopt the new rates?
And before they become effective.
Correct. Because typically there is a 90-day period that the rates have to be noticed and advertised. We did that back on March 28th to run the 90 days, and that's why the rates will be effective as of June 29th. Okay? Provided that you adopt the ordinances.
Does anybody else want to do that? I'm not really.
I don't personally want,
I think we
that sort
should
of
stick
defeats
to
the
the
whole
dates.
grandfathered request. I understand my fellow commissioners' desire and reasoning for that. I think it's practical and sounds good, but I think we're better served in doing it the day we adopt.
If we wanted to do everything, we could put it like July 1st, everything July 1st.
Well,
But I stick to the numbers. I think that's what you get a consensus.
I think it's like Commissioner Lockhart, I think, alluded to. We've been talking about this,
for a long time.
We were talking about this when I was on the Plan and Zoning Commission 4 years ago.
We were
This was
talking
on the
about this
radar.
during the school impact
Correct.
fees, too, that it was time that we had to do it. And that's something I want to bring in. You asked the question, so I'm going to make a statement because Commissioner Lockhart did, and I just want to let you, my feelings about this. I think that phasing in is a bad idea. I think that we need to do it. We know what the numbers are. We know that the numbers are fair. We know we know that because we haven't done it since 2002 for the water and wastewater, and hasn't been since 92 for the libraries and 95 for the others, that if you want to talk about phasing, they've been getting a great deal for a long, long time. As someone else said, it hasn't, and I think it was Commissioner Lockhart too, it hasn't affected anything, that our fellow counties are much higher than we are, far higher than we are, and are looking to raise it once again. We know what the numbers are, so I don't feel, and if we believe that the methodology is correct, I do not believe that phasing is the right thing to do. Here's the numbers, here's where we're going to put it in, and then we'll go it for the next 4 years. So that's my personal opinion. I hope, I mean, does anybody else? Yes, Mr. Zimbauer.
Well, I haven't made my mind ultimately what I'm going to decide at the end of the day. But again, I go back to these rates have not been increased, in some cases 20 years, some cases 30 years. How in the world has this county survived 20 or 30 years with no increase? How have the libraries stayed open? How have we managed infrastructure? How has all these things happened? And I get the fact that we have not had an update. I'm not an advocate of not reviewing and revisiting, as we've all talked about multiple times, for 20 and 30 and 40 years. So I'm going to be looking for staff to tell me, hey, we've hit the general fund for X amount of millions of dollars every year because we weren't collecting enough impact fees. I'm going to be looking for staff to tell me, hey, it's the 1 cent sales tax that's propped up the availability for the impact fees to remain what they were. Whatever that nexus is, I'm going to need to see that and understand what that is. And once I understand that, then the question becomes is, what additional revenue are you now creating out of the 1 cent sales tax, as well as general fund getting better, that we may have discussions about other areas that we need to look at.
And Commissioner Zimbauer, I remember when you first got on, you were constantly talking about the services that were not provided, that we have gotten behind in, and everything else like that. That's the answer to your own question. I agree. I mean, when I first got here and I looked at and it said that the impact fees hadn't been done for a long time, the citizens of Seminole County that live here today are subsidizing those. One of two ways. Either they're not getting the services that they could get, or they're paying more in taxes to get that, including the sales tax that we've done. Now, that I'm not suggesting that's not a good idea. With the schools and the cities and all of us involved in it, that has been something that I've been very proud that this community is willing to step up to the plate. But, if we had fair and equitable impact fees that kept up with the times, I think that we would be ahead of the curve instead of the tough decisions many times that the previous commissions that we weren't on, except for Commissioner Delory, had to make. And so I think we see that right now constantly when our staff is coming to us and saying, we've tightened our belts so much that we don't have anything to give back. So that's where I think we're going to see an opportunity when it comes to service. Commissioner.
And I don't necessarily disagree. And so what I'm saying is, if you remember during last year's budget session, when I asked for a very, very detailed list of the infrastructure that was not being maintained, many in our parks, I think we had $26 million of deferred maintenance over a period of 10 or 15 years. What I'm saying is that's the kind of stuff I'm going to need to see to have assurances, hey, these things will not be taken care of.
And I remember applauding you for that. Because, okay.
Doesn't cover that, yeah.
I don't think we can tell you that. So, because there are just simply different pots of money and different, there are still things, there are things that won't get done if you don't move forward with these. I mean,
Sure.
that really is the bottom line.
Right.
We've been subsidizing fire construction with fire fund dollars,
Right.
ad valorem dollars.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
And I'd like to add to that, also, remember, the purpose of impact fees is to offset the new development.
Right.
The impacts from the new development. A lot of the items you're talking about there are operations and maintenance, which impact fees cannot be attributed to.
But we've been using general fund dollars.
That's right, understood. We've just been playing the shell
We've
game.
been using general fund dollars, is what our county manager said. I want to make sure that we just had that for the record.
I just wanted to clarify the impact fees are only going towards capital improvements.
I want you all to know that it's past 12 o'clock, so it's all of our faults. Commissioner Delory and then Commissioner Hurd, and then we still have people to speak, and Mr. Chipoff?
If I may, just on the phasing issue.
I said Chipoff, yes. Go ahead, Chipoff.
On the phasing issue, under House Bill 337, there is a maximum that you can raise impact fees, and it's 50%. Okay? If you're raising it 50%, you do have to phase them in over a 4-year period. Okay? Except for the circumstance under subsection G of the extraordinary circumstances. The first part of our workshop today was devoted towards those extraordinary circumstances. We are raising some of the impact fees, and the majority of them, beyond 50% of the existing impact fees. So therefore, we are already in the category of the extraordinary circumstance. And at that point, we need to, it's a leveling and a rectification of the impact fees in this extraordinary circumstance. So in the future, in 4 years, when we revisit these, phasing may be an option then, but my recommendation to you is that since we are utilizing that extraordinary circumstance, we need to do it fully now, and then just any phasing discussion should be deferred for the 4 years to the next time the impact fees are looked at, if there needs to be an adjustment at that point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chipak, and that is what we did with the school board, too, is go straight, not do the phasing when we approved it. Commissioner Delory.
I believe Commissioner Lockhart raised her hand first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, is there a way to, I understand we have taken the action so that we could pursue the extraordinary measures, but that doesn't mean that we could not implement some type of phasing. Maybe it's not 4 years, maybe it's 2 years. I want to make sure I understand. It doesn't mean that we can't phase. It means that we don't have to. Is that correct? Or am I misinterpreting it?
Our studies, again, our studies are based on raising the impact fees all at the same time. I don't believe that there's any analysis that has been done on what the implications would be if the money is phased in over a period of time. So the impact fees and the rates that you have been given are to raise the amount that is necessary to bring it to the levels, to support the levels of service that you need in one shot at this point in time.
Okay, Commissioner Delory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit of history as I kind of remember it, and I'm not trying to rewrite history, just what I remember. There's many reasons why the impact fees haven't been raised. I believe the first time was, well, many times it was because that this county was a bedroom community, that people were going to Orange County. And so I believe the commission at that time didn't want to raise impact fees, so they would allow growth in this county. And then as we moved out of that scenario, then in 07, 08, the housing industry, basically because of the mortgages, had a huge downturn in the economy. That caused it as well. And that took us a number of years to get out of. And it wasn't just 1 or 2, it was 5, 6 years before we got out of that. And then with the state's ability to roll back the millage rate, I think that was in 14, I think it was, that was another hiccup. All those hiccups are now past us, and I just don't want to think that the past commissioners or commissions did not want to do it, but there was situations that wanted to make sure that our impact fees were at a lower rate because of the bedroom community scenario, because of the financial crash of the mortgages in 07, 08, as well as the rollback of the millage rate. I think it was in 14 or 12, I forget what year it was. And I just wanted to make sure that that's on the record, that people didn't forget about those 3 different scenarios. Because of that, I believe the commissioners in the past, as well as the staff, and a lot had to do with the staff, that they were able to figure out ways to combat that, to get this community to where it is today. Moving forward, it's quite obvious that things need to change and be adjusted, but we cannot forget the lift that those past commissioners and staff have done through those other times, and it wasn't easy. And I'm glad that the staff and the commission at that scenarios were doing the right thing. And here we are today. So it's not that they didn't want to do it, it's because they were trying to make sure that we weren't a bedroom community, that people just weren't always commuting to Orange County. That's changed. People are now working here in place in this county, and we're actually competing with Orange County. Then you have the financial crash of the mortgages. That was a big scenario that took us a number of years to get out of, as well as the rollback of the millage that the state pushed us back to.
And Commissioner Delory, I think everybody was, applauding the fact that you guys worked hard to keep that thing,
Mr.
but
Chairman,
that's...
there's many times that sometimes people forget those scenarios, and I just wanted to make sure that that's on the record.
Okay, Commissioner Herr, and then I'm going to get to Ms. Hammack. Commissioner Herr.
I don't think I answered the question about phasing, so I'm going to answer it. I think House Bill 337 would indicate that we should not phase for two reasons. One is the studies weren't done based on phasing, and the second is that in 4 years, should whatever it is that we are about to do, if we do phase and end up without enough revenue, then the increase in the future is restricted to phase. So I personally believe that the citizens of the community have subsidized development for long enough, and we need to do it as the studies would have indicated that we should do it.
Okay. Ms. Hammack, do you have all the answers to the questions that you need?
Yes, and just to follow up on that, and I think just to hopefully 100% answer Commissioner Lockhart's question on the phasing, so because most of our impact fee increases are over 50%, if we were to choose phasing, then we would have to phase over 4 years.
Yep.
And so the recommendation is that we, do it all at once at this time so that we can, bring them up to the appropriate impact fee rates.
Thank you very much. We do have some folks that wish to speak, and I do want to get to them. And first, we have on a green card public comment, we have on Susan Kellli, I believe L-U-T, from Winter Springs, and she asks a number of questions, which I'm going to try to answer very quickly. Is it my understanding that the county procedures state that impact fees are to be reviewed every 4 years? Is this correct? Yes, that's what we're intending to do with this ordinance. It is my understanding that the current library impact fee was not been updated since '91. No, it's '92. Can someone explain the contradiction? Yes, I think we've talked about that a lot as to why they did not increase, or previous commissions, or up until right now, the current commission did not do impact fees. There were a number of different reasons. What is being done to ensure the situation? Well, I think our own perseverance about the fact that we are not going to delay anymore, that we're going to look at this every 4 years. And I think 337, for all its negative, also gives us a positive. We better look at it every 4 years, or we will really fall behind through this new legislation. So I hope that answered your questions, ma'am. And I wanted to, Clint, is there anybody out there? I know that there was no one in for the previous wellness program. Is there anyone in cyber that wishes to speak before I go to the people here?
No, sir.
All right. So let's go to the folks here. And Ricardo, I always make sure that I get to you. Ricardo Rodriguez, please.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioner. Ricardo Rodriguez, Greater Orlando Builders Association. For the record, 1953 Clayton Heritage Way, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Obviously, we're here to talk about the impact fee law that was signed last week by the governor. The new law requires phasing in of impact fees unless extraordinary circumstances can be demonstrated and proven. Today's public workshop is being held in an attempt to demonstrate and prove that these extraordinary circumstances are present as to go beyond the new law requirements. Though the term extraordinary circumstances was left undefined by the legislature in the new law, based upon the robust discussions in the legislature and the clear intent of the law, extraordinary circumstances was intended to be a very rare exception and not the rule. It was meant to be a safety valve for those very rare instances and circumstances when it was absolutely necessary and there are no other choices available for a local government but to go beyond the fee requirements. It was not intended to be used as a way around the phase-in caps and the requirements. It is clear that the intent was to ensure that impact fees are predictable and digestible and do not harm or deter the creation of housing affordability in this state. This does not mean, of course, that impact fees cannot go up to address legitimate needs. And indeed, under the law, fees can go up incrementally every single year to the point of even doubling, if not more, every 8 years or so. As such, the law still allows for adequate funding for infrastructure while also reasonably balancing the dire need for housing affordability and predictability in the housing industry. As such, it would be our preference that the fees be phased in over time, especially as housing costs continue to skyrocket due to increase and immense price increases of lumber and other building materials currently going on because of the COVID pandemic that we've been dealing with, and as well as other issues that our industry is dealing with right now as we go forward. We ask that you keep this in mind during the workshop and all your discussions on this as we go forward, and we look forward to working with you as we always do with these issues. Thank you so much for your time. I think I said good morning, but it's been past 12 noon, so good afternoon. You all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you.
Question, Ricardo?
I have a question for you. So what part of this morning's presentation do you think puts us in a situation that is not extraordinary?
As a builder, I'm not a direct builder, so I wouldn't know what that situation is.
Okay.
And I'd have to reach out to my builders within my association to figure that out for you.
If you would, I'd love to have them review what was presented to us and share with us what they might agree with or disagree with.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
I spoke with Mr. Steinhauer several times during these discussions, and this may be a question for my staff. It's my understanding GOBA has been engaged and at the table with conversations right along. Is that your understanding, Mr. Rodriguez?
It is my understanding.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So staff, we've kept GOBA completely engaged and up to speed? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Great.
Yep.
And Mr. Rodriguez, I just want you to send back a thank you to Mr. Shellman on your board. He took the extraordinary, ladies and gentlemen, he took the extraordinary move from, you know, a fellow home builder to call me up right after the report about the court results when it came to Rivercross, to thank us for being so steadfast, the whole commission. And so thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm not saying that was extraordinary. I'm just simply saying that that was welcome to hear that from folks in your industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Miss Nina, how you doing? Nina Martin, please, of the Realtors.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you on behalf of the Orlando Regional Realtor Association. We, as you know, ORA is one of the largest trade associations with more than now 19,000 realtors in Orange and Seminole counties. Our members are residential and commercial realtors, brokers, salespersons, property managers, appraisers, counselors, and other industry professionals. And realtors are the only advocacy group that exclusively represent homeownership, real estate investment, strong communities, and free enterprise in the Central Florida area. So with that, after careful review of the amendments and hearing the discussion today, we do continue to urge you to consider the workforce housing that conversation that went forward today. Of the proposed increases, we would ask that you consider including the wastewater capacity fees in the conversations for the either discount or subsidy for single-family housing. Just to provide a little bit of context, of course, the middle income and working families do absorb primarily the cost of these impact fees on the purchase price of their new homes. The average listing price today in Seminole County is $571,000, and the average days on market is just 17. In fact, the market supply of single-family homes is down 63% in a year-over-year comparison at just under 1 month's supply of inventory. In fact, the inventory between 100 and 200,000 was less than 12%. So again, there's a tremendous need for housing, and we just ask that you continue to be thoughtful in your conversations for workforce housing. But we do applaud your efforts today, and we look forward to working with you. And if there's anything that we can provide statistically or otherwise, we are available to do that with you. Thank you so much.
Anita, thank you very much, and thank Cliff for his hard work working with us on this. Just so you know, I mean, what we did today with workforce, I think, falls right into what you're asking for. So, you know, we acknowledge that, and we've, I think, really made some steps to improve on the workforce. We already had with affordable housing, but workforce. And the second thing is, I think you heard from our water and wastewater folks, the covenant of the bonds does not allow us to do that. And so that's going to be when it comes to water and wastewater. So that's going to be hard for us, we can't fulfill that request. But, other than that, I think that we're on the same page with you when it comes to this. And this is an extraordinary year for realtors, is it not?
It is.
Oh, my goodness, you can't even keep a house on the market for 4 days, and people are buying it for more than the list price.
It's a seller's market.
Nobody would ever expect it. Yes?
We may have an opportunity with respect to the water and wastewater and looking at the ARPA funds, so there may still be an
Okay.
opportunity to work with the Realtors Association.
Not within the context of this.
Not within the context of these ordinances, but there may still be some other opportunities through other efforts to help continue to incentivize.
So the conversation will continue.
Great. Thank you so much. Look forward to it.
And Kanwan, your mayor laid it all out for us, so.
She did. So she laid it all out. I'm here to just highlight.
Okay.
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Kakwan Ma, 225 East Robinson Street, here representing the city. I just want to, again, just highlight some of the things.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, which city are you recommending?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here representing the city of Oviedo.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Good job.
So Mayor Sladek went over one of the main points that the city of Oviedo wishes to have amended in the ordinance, and that is the ability to opt out. As you know, the city has started the process of doing a mobility study, and what they want to avoid is when they reach the end of that process, they want to avoid having a situation where the county commission takes the study and just says, no, we don't think so. And so we just want to make sure that we have some protections in there that will give us the same opportunities that Altamont Springs has. And I know we've said that a number of times. In the language that Mayor Sladek read, there was one point that she read that I want to make sure gets driven home, and that is upon completion of the study and the development of municipal mobility fee for the city of Oviedo that addresses improvements to the county's mobility system within and in proximity to the boundaries of the city of Oviedo in coordination with Seminole County. So we want to make sure that both parties are players at that table to discuss that study once it is submitted. There is also one part that she didn't read that towards the end that says, "The City of Oviedo shall no longer," so this is once we go through that process, and if accepted, "The City of Oviedo shall no longer be subject to the provisions of this ordinance unless the calculated mobility fees are less than the cumulative fees charged by the county." So again, that is another provision that would provide some protection for the county to make sure that those fees are covered.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I appreciate that very much. Is there any other public comment forms out there that somebody hasn't returned? Okay. Anybody else have anything that we need to discuss right now? Mr. Chipak, would it be okay if I made a 1:45 instead of a 1:30 opening for the commission?
You can always go later, yes.
Okay, so we're going to open the commission meeting at 1:45, giving you an hour and 15 minutes. Anybody have an objection with that? Seeing none, we'll be back after a recess at 1:45.